Welcome to Thorin's YouTube channel. Andrew, shut the fuck up, you piece of shit. Welcome to Thorin's YouTube channel. It's going to be a wild ride. GG, motherfuckers.
Okay, this is another episode of whatever we call this thing where I talk to the Patreon donated discussion. It's not really the classiest name, is it? Patreon donated discussion. But then again, there's no point just dressing this up as some ridiculous other name of a thing. Was it like I guess I could have called it like, actually this would probably be a sicker name, like Thorin's Snuff Room discussion or something. Like the idea of like a very elite back room in sort of a secret society or something that like only the true. Then again, that's the problem. It's not really. I'm not really curating it at all. If you just pay $100, you get in. Like it's not like some secret society that you have to join.
We all wear masks every day.
Exactly. So okay. We won't bother with one of those like introduction type things. People should know the score by now. So let's start with this then. So like Jerky, since there's been a few where scheduling issues, work, all of the above have kept you from being on the episode. Do you have a topic you want to start us out with? Is there something in the esports news or the world at the moment that's interesting to you?
Well, to me, Quake is very interesting, but also CS currently because, well, Cologne's coming up. It's a big event. It's pretty much sold out every year.
Okay.
So I want to kind of go for that one.
Okay. Right. Let's talk about that then. So ESL1 Cologne is coming up. Let me have a look at actually what teams are there. Because as far as I remember, it's a pretty good lineup from what I remember. Let me have a look.
Yep.
Like the only downside is I think that because the ENCE team came through the qualifier, like presumably some good teams didn't get through there. But like, okay, so we've got Astralis, FaZe, Mouse Sports, Na'Vi, Team Liquid, Fnatic. So basically all the best teams.
Yeah.
There's no SK, but then again, they're not one of the best teams at the moment.
They just changed rosters, so
yeah. There's no NRG, but then again, that's because obviously they wouldn't have been invited at this point in time. And I would assume I'm gonna check the North American qualifier, but I'm guessing they didn't make it. Or did they just not play? It looks like they actually didn't play. Oh no, they did. They forfeit. Okay, well that's their own fault.
Against who?
They just forfeit both the games, so it looks like they just chose not to play. So Renegades won that qualifier. Fair enough. Renegades isn't terrible. Amazingly, this Boot team won the Asian qualifier. Let's have a look at that. Which actually did have Tyloo in it. Tyloo didn't make it. That's a shame. European qualifier is Gambit and North.
The SK logo just got replaced with the MIBR one, by the way.
Ah, right. Yes, I missed that. Okay, right. So in that case, they are there anyway. Obviously, the only real surprise one here is that Big was invited.
Want to see Smooya?
So let's have a look at the rankings now, because you have to remember that when it's an event like ESL Cologne, you obviously do send the invites out staggered so that you can announce them all. So I'm trying to look who would you even invite here.
The invites were C9, Big, Astralis, G2, Liquid, MIBR, Na'Vi, Fnatic, Massports, and NIP.
Like, assuming you send the invite out, and at least it's got to be minimum March or April, I think. Then if you look at the top 10 back then, I don't think there's really any team they haven't invited. Let's have a look. Cloud9's invited.
Maybe Space Soldiers, I don't know.
No, because back then they were ranked like number 14, and I'm looking at NHLTV.org, yeah. So, I mean, some of this is luck, because I guess you can't necessarily know that some of these teams will still be in the top X or whatever. But actually, I can't really think that they've missed anyone here. Like I say, Tyloo making it would be nice. Whatever. It was a qualifier, they didn't make it. NRG making it would be nice. Then again, all the NRG results came after the period I'm talking about. So I don't think that's an unreasonable lineup. I think it's one of the best ones we've got overall. Then you've got the format, which is obviously that sick ESL format. I think that's one of the best ones we've had.
Yeah.
I actually like that it's different as well to the other events, because what's weird is you do notice there's like a coherence between how people do in this format versus the other formats, which is something we noticed years ago in esports. And what's interesting is there's not really any sound conclusions people have for why different teams make it through the different formats. Then again, though, we haven't had as much of a like data set as we do for this year. So maybe at the end of this year, people will figure out how people do in Swiss systems and do in the other ones, because there's definitely teams that do worse in some of them and better in the others. Right, okay, so what do you think jumps off the page about ESL Cologne, Alex? What do you like about this one?
I mean, obviously the lineup is really sick, and like you said, the format is great. I'll be interested to see, because when you're talking about teams doing bad in certain systems, for whatever reason, it seems like in the past, G2 has always done really bad in Swiss systems. Is it just me? Like, it seems like it happens a lot.
Except the major, where they 3-0'd.
Yeah. Besides, I don't know.
Did they 3-0 or was it 3-1?
Yeah.
I can't remember.
3-0.
Yeah. That's just off the top of my head. I
think that's the only one I can remember them smashing, though.
Yeah, I have no data behind that. But
well, one reason I know it's accurate in some sense, mate, is that first of all, obviously, Swiss system first was introduced as the qualifier for the major itself, and then as the first round of the major. And if you remember, obviously, like actually, G2's most recent major was their best major result in ages, because that was like a top 8, whereas they always used to bomb the group stage.
Yeah, bomb group stages, man.
Yeah.
So yeah, sadly, you're probably right.
So I guess, I don't know, other than that, I guess also speaking of G2, you hopefully see something out of them, out of this event, because we haven't really seen much of them yet.
Well, it's a fairly new lineup. I mean,
yeah,
you can't just go off from one event and then say they're going to be garbage or good.
Yeah. I mean, and
that's what a lot of people did. You know, like instantly the first result of the match comes up. I see so many people tweeting, "Get him out of there! Cut him already!" It's like, come on, man! It's one match. How can you do different things?
And they supposedly only had like 5 days of practice before that event anyway, right?
Yeah.
So,
and also they basically said, before the event even began, something along the lines of like, not only did we not have much practice time, but like we haven't implemented our whole system, and instead they were basically going, as far as I can tell, of old shit that they did in G2. So unfortunately, when you hear that result is basically just like a form test for people individually. It doesn't really have anything to do with how the team is, because you just openly just saying we aren't actually implementing what we're doing because we haven't got time, which makes a lot of sense actually, because in terms of teams, in theory, an existence team should be the opposite of like a Carrigan team, where it should take you at least a couple of lands before you get going, because the amount of effort you're going to put into specific maps is so much that if you tried doing it with like 8 days, you'd get like a map and a half in. So it would be, it would actually, if anything, be more of a waste of time. So I can see to some degree why they thought we'll just go to this one and just free for all it and see what happens. And yeah, individually it wasn't very good overall. And basically just Kenny S went off. Shocks isn't back. That's one of the things people haven't stopped to think about there. Think about how many extenuating factors there are. So already we need Shocks and Kenny S to be really good, right? Kenny S was pretty good overall. Fair enough. Got that one. Like he had that classic map where it was kind of like throwback Titan game. But Shocks has literally just come off wrist surgery. Like, he's not just going to instantly be at his best again, you know. That's the sort of thing that's going to... Who knows how long that takes again. You just hope they come back from it. I would imagine he probably will, because I know some people have had it before. Flash had it in Brood War. Still came back a very good player. But then you look at the other players. Smith's literally totally inactive. And it doesn't matter how many times people tell you, like, oh, I've been playing DM. Like, DM is completely irrelevant. It's not going to make you in match form, you know, until you've played in match form. It's irrelevant. And I've never understood the people who actually think that Smith has no skill at Counter-Strike. Like, he's clearly never been... This is what people will never understand. It's like, it's 2018 and people still think that my opinions are like, this person is pure shit. This person is a god. Like, I don't think there's almost anyone I have that opinion of. Nearly always the opinions that I make fun of are relative to other people's opinions. So, for example, if people massively overrate a player, like, okay, one I've always battled against is the idea that, like, Flusher was a god. I've always gone against that because, to me, it just never turned up in the game. But it certainly was a good player. I would never say he was a shit player. I think that would be outrageous. Then you go on the other end of the equation. I mean, I'll give you a good example. I have never said that Cadian is a really good player, but the idea he's a shit player is terrible. Like, I don't know what... I genuinely don't know where that opinion comes. I can only assume it comes from people who just dislike his personality or just have heard him as like the butt of a joke and I haven't watched him play, because whenever I've watched him play, he's absolutely a competent player, you know, would never put him in a top team, but if you want to have like a tier 2 team, he could absolutely play in most of them. So
he's actually smart.
So to me, yeah, I think people have gone way too hard on the Smiths one, because there's plenty of other players that they have no problem imagining will return to being decent players, but for some reason they won't even allow in their mind for the idea that Smiths can get back to where he was a year and a half, 2 years ago. You know, he can't even just be a competent player in their mind. So the problem is on that team. These aren't even excuses. These are just factors that you could have said going into the team that will be there for them as a squad. So I don't know what at the moment I can't judge them at all. Basically, like I didn't see anything at that ECS to judge them off. But
it is going to be hard though to get back to form though after a year and a half off.
Year and a half not in competition, and you have to go against some of the best teams in the world. An absolutely insane simple. Someone we have never seen in such
your mic's pretty low, by the way, Jerky. Is it turned on? It sounds like it isn't. No, it sounds like it's on your webcam mic, mate.
Oh, let me just change it.
Just double check that. Because we can hear you, but it's just not that great.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, hopefully we see some sort of, I guess, progression from G2.
Isn't this just going to be a very easy tournament for Astralis? I mean, at least compared to any other team. Do we know who FaZe is bringing as the 5th?
Right, wait there a sec, mate.
It's probably Croman still.
Yeah.
I would assume so.
So who is the competition? Like how is Astralis not winning? What's the
they'll probably win. I don't know.
Who is winning them? Yeah.
Wait there a minute.
I mean, I think FaZe can win.
Does it work now better?
Yes.
There we go.
Works properly. Okay. Yeah. Right. So the discussion is basically: is Astralis going to auto win the event, or are there people who can challenge them? Basically,
haven't we already seen someone challenge? I mean, how close did Simple come to godlike form already again? If he goes off and Flamey plays well, I give Navi a chance.
A chance. That's about it, though.
Liquid have proven they're capable of fighting back as well.
Yeah, I mean, FaZe. I like FaZe's lineup right now pretty well.
Croman worked out in that last event for him, so
yeah, Croman is. I was impressed with Croman because he was winning an assload of entry duels without like any utility at all being thrown for him. So I thought it was pretty good for him.
You have to also consider there's absolutely no pressure on him.
Yeah.
If he's garbage, they will get a new guy. If he's not, guess what? He's going to get to stay a little bit longer.
Yeah.
Sure.
But isn't the second tournament worse? Because now people know where he's playing, what he's doing usually. Whereas before it was completely random.
He didn't have any habits to go off from. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Astralis will probably look at that sort of thing because that's just kind of how they are.
That's how they are.
To me, the main issue here is that obviously there's only a best of one at the very beginning of the tournament. So after that, you have to play best of threes the whole way through. So that definitely makes it a lot harder for Astralis not to win the tournament. And then you add in that until you get to the final bracket, it's double a limb as well. So they can even go ahead and lose one. They could just lose to someone. Maybe Team Liquid plays the game of their lives in some amazing match. Okay, as long as that's in the group stage, you can still beat them in the final.
I kind of like this revamped format from them though. It's longer extended periods, get best of threes. I mean, what more do you want? Everything best of three would have been absolutely absurd for their costs, I think.
The only thing is though, when I look at the lineup here, it is hard to see who's actually going to beat Astralis in a best of three. Because some of the names you have to take immediately off the
check mark
radar, obviously Cloud9 remove. Let's have a look. G2 probably remove again. Don't really know. We can't really expect anything from them. And they'd probably be playing in a best of three. I think Fnatic you probably have to chuck out. I don't really see how they're gonna who knows? Maybe they could win a best of three the first time they play. That's probably plausible, but I wouldn't pick it to happen.
Yeah.
The Team Liquid one is worrying. I actually think Team Liquid could get them, but only if they play them early. That's a classic example of where this is a factor I feel like is so underrated. This is why I don't really care that most people in Counter-Strike still use fucking stats to back up their points. What I don't understand is the ones that are smart will never claim that they used the stat to arrive at the point. absolute nonsense, of course. I know most of them do. But what they'll do is they think that by saying, oh, here's my opinion and here's a stat to back it up, that it's like, what? There's science. Did science, lads, proved my point? It's like, you haven't in any way. What you've done is just find something that's vaguely correlated to what you're now claiming it means, you know. But when people do that, right, one of the things I don't understand is they act as though every match takes place in a vacuum. Like it's the first time it's ever happened. The teams have these exact odds. If they won or lost, that represents the odds somehow. And therefore, you see people saying mad shit. Like basically, the best time you can notice people's really whack analysis is when it's like teams that historically A always beats B. So, for example, when that SK team always used to beat FaZe, or Fallen's teams always beat Karrigan's teams, with the longer narrative, people really acted as though that was like a magical force in the world. And so, for example, last time when they met, do you remember? It's where FaZe just like plowed the shit out of VeXii. It was very easy.
Yeah.
But if you'd have listened to the way these people talk, that was impossible. That one result couldn't happen, because the fact that Fallen's teams had won all the past ones somehow in their mind made him even more certain to win the next one, which doesn't make any sense really when you analyze the game. So one of the factors I've always thought was very underrated is where in the tournament you play a team, because actually, when you had that classic upset at PGL Krakow where Astralis beat SK Gaming was the better team at the time, but playing them in the quarterfinals was actually better for Astralis than if they'd have played in the final, because then you had none of that shit going on of like it being a massive final, you're playing for the title.
They still had choking issues.
All the pressure. Yeah, there's no reason to. It's closer to a group stage game. So what you're probably going to actually have is Astralis are going to turn up, just play their game. It's not going to be much pressure on them, because here's the thing. Yes, definitely your opponent adds some layer of pressure, but a lot of the pressure is just where you are in the tournament. That's why FaZe lost all those finals. It definitely wasn't that all the teams beating them were better. They just had some sort of mental issue in finals. And so that's, funnily enough, they also proved the rule, right? Because think about how many times they beat the better teams earlier in the tournament, then got to the final, lost to the team where it's like, what the fuck, you'd already done all the hard work. Why are you losing now? Like, this is supposed to be the victory lap in the final to take the title. So that's the main thing for me, is I think a lot of these teams have got to get the Astralis team early.
Mm-hmm.
Although I still think the jury's not out on whether Astralis can lose if they're in a close series and there's pressure and all that sort of shit. Because if you think about it,
if it's teams who face them early on, I think FaZe, Navi, Mouse, Liquid, I give those 4 a chance against them if they face them early on enough.
Yeah, I mean, on your point of something being different, or like the stakes being different, playing at different points in the tournament, I almost feel like FaZe would have had a better chance in ESL Pro League if they had played them Astralis in the final rather than the semifinal, you know? Like, and it felt like Liquid did worse because it was a final, you know? That's what it felt like to me. I don't know.
Wasn't it their first final?
Liquid?
Yeah, for their lineup.
I don't know. Technically, they didn't see a Summit final, but
yeah, they won Summit.
It's not like a tier 1.
That was the same. Yeah.
Kind of got to take that with a grain of salt.
Yeah, it was still a decent event from what I remember. It was like right after the major. C9 was still pretty good.
The funny thing is, considering like they are the number 2 ranked team in the world for most people with Na'Vi, right? The problem with that is that a lot of that is obviously like empty calories. Like they're only really there because they have Simple, which is kind of not even unfair to say, because that's not the same as saying that another team has a star player. Like absolutely, there's been star players that were massive carries for their team, but that's like above and beyond that, because of the fact that just like the way Simple plays sort of like improves your game in like 2 or 3 different dimensions. So I feel like it's unfair. Like they're definitely the number 2 team because you have to go off placings in tournaments. But like relative to other number 2 teams in history, I don't think they have that great a chance generally to beat the number 1 team. But I actually do think if you look at the moment that they have a half decent chance to, because one of the things that's gotten really insane about Na'Vi over the last, like I would say the last 3 tournaments, is that their map pool has gotten really big now. It's actually legit as fuck. Like bearing in mind, obviously they're going to ban cash in a lot of scenarios anyway. Pretty much everything else they can play. I mean, the only thing that would be a worrying sign is when they got forced to play Dust 2 against Virtus Pro in this Asian CSGO Championships, they did shit the bed completely. But at the same time, A lot of teams don't play Dust 2 as it is. That's the whole reason why no one's played. So I'll say that they've got a flaw there and obviously don't play cash. But literally every other map is playable. Now, in part because obviously part of their secret, I think, has been you figure out how to use simple on the maps you're not as good on. So you get to look a bit better. But yeah, generally, I think their map pool's decent enough that they could do it. The big issue there is, obviously, even with the last lineup of Astralis, they were infamously good at like playing against superstar players, which funnily enough, this is just a factor that someone needs to sort of like unpick the thread on this, because it was actually the same in CS 1.6, which is that in 1.6, the teams that Ave and Zonic were in, the MTW squads, were also very good against like superstar carry type players. So if they played against Forest or other players like that, they were pretty good actually.
They counterplayed them every time.
Yeah, the thing is you can't like completely shut them down, but the point is in that scenario, if you have superior teamwork, you can sort of limit them to some degree, you know, give yourself a chance to win the game, which is one of the reasons, funnily enough, like I actually thought a pretty cool factor on the way out of 1.6 that a lot of people won't know is I did a feature right at the end of the game where when we were going into like the last year CS 1.6, I did like a poll of about like 20 current and former pros at the time. And in the poll, it had questions like, you know, who was the best player in history? Who was the best player you played with? Who was the best tactician you played against? You know, all these factors like that. And what was interesting was if you went down the list, like the split between players who had like Neo and Forest as the best player was fairly even actually. I would say it was slightly slanted towards Neo, but it was, you know, it was pretty even, which is what usually the discussions and debates were like. But every single MTW member all had Neo as the best player ever. And I know that that's one of the factors why is that when they played against Forest, they had a lot of success. Like they actually had many, many big games where he was just an ordinary player. Whereas the difference was when they played against Neo,
they feared him.
They couldn't really shut him down entirely, you know. And so he always would have like it looked like whatever type of game he was having was just based on how he was doing. You know, they couldn't really do anything, which actually suggests something. I don't really know what it would be, but
mental.
Something's happening with how he played the game that you couldn't really individually shut down. The downside is, like, I don't think you can shut Simple down, but I definitely think that
he's containable.
If you have a good enough team, you can sort of create some chances for yourself playing against him.
I know, like, they figure out nades every single time for, like, every opponent to abuse, and maybe they can find it for Simple, but he's a bit free bromy, isn't he? Like,
well, plus, if you think about it,
once.
This is actually also, as much as everyone can bemoan the fact that Simple has to be stuck on Na'Vi, whereas you'd want him to be on a team that could win all the tournaments, you know, to be fair, this is actually the best time to be on Na'Vi, because if you look at all the other teams in the top 5, top 7, the amount of them that play with star players and just play a loose style, it's loads of them, and that is the dream style if you want to be a super hard carry stuck on a team that's not the best. That's your best chance to win the game. They're basically making it fucking DM all the time. That's the reason why when they play against Mouse Sports, I think it's ridiculous that Mouse Sports has lost or come close to losing as many series against Na'Vi. Like, every time I've watched them play, Mouse Sports on paper should have won every single one of these series, but the reason they lose or come close to is because they do the exact opposite of what you should do against Simple. They just take like one-on-one aim duels against him. I don't understand what they think they're doing. It's because that style works like gangbusters against everyone else.
Because they play tactical, and then like Navi's like, oh, we have the best player in the world with 1.59 rating. Let's go. I want to aim duel all day. Like, that's Simple style, man. Like, and they go one-on-one. Like, how do you think that's gonna work? Maybe 1 in 3 times you get him, and like Electronic comes around the corner and shoots you down.
Yep. Simple is very good.
The downside for me is that this lineup, like in the context of who's available, so relative judgment, it's fabulous. It's got basically all the teams you'd want. But if you think about the period where we're at the moment, this is actually a bit depressing in terms of like who's going to win the tournament, because all the big names that you'd want to have a chance to haven't done anything whatsoever to make it likely they'll win. Like, here's the thing. What's mad is, I mean, If I hadn't have just had that kind of lackluster exit at the Asian CSGO Championship, you might have hoped NIB could do something. You might have thought, oh, new lineup, maybe they can do something. But actually, if you watched that, there wasn't really much going on there.
Yeah.
That was a pretty shit show.
Is it just me?
There's still a world in which Mouse Sports has a chance. Unfortunately, I feel like their map pool's not that ideal. I don't think MIBR is going to do anything.
Mouse map pool seems to have shrunk instead of increased. If anything.
Yeah.
That's also just because, though, this is a good example of where, like, here's the thing: as a team, you very rarely choose the maps you're really good on. What you can usually choose, because which maps you're really good on tend to just be dictated by the literal results. What you can choose is more like what's in the middle of your map pool. Like, right, we were focusing on this map, but it hasn't worked out that well. Maybe we switch it up and focus on this other one instead. The problem I see for Mouse Sports is, like, they got so many wins on maps like Mirage. They would win on Inferno when people would pick it against them. That, like, they also did that thing where they just fell in love with thinking that, like, that's their map pool, and like that eventually will hurt you, I think.
Yeah. I don't know. It feels like right now in CS, the gap between the number 1 team and the number 2 team is like larger than I can ever remember. Has there been any other point that it's been so long? I mean,
yeah,
it feels like
2013, 2012, early on.
Okay, yeah, I guess.
That's
Yeah,
when the
that's
gap
a good
like
point.
between number 1 and 2 was really big, but
Yeah.
But this
No,
is
but
early in the game.
that feels a bit unfair, though, because to be fair, the
that
gap was just that in terms of the matchup nip one every time. In terms of like who's like number 2.
Yeah,
like, if you'd have had like if you'd have had like a point ranking, obviously Nip would still be number 1 because they'll win all the events.
Like, VP
but like Very Games was pretty high up too as well.
Yeah.
Like I thought the best way to describe this, I'm actually going to start doing it myself, was like the people who I forget what their name is now. Some new website, or Esports Kingdom, I think it was, who did this where for their rankings on who the best are, they basically did like the same tier system that we used to do in StarCraft Brood War back in the day, like 15 years ago, where what you do is, instead of saying like Astralis is number 1, Navi's number 2, FaZe is number 3, right? Because that's actually not as useful as knowing who can actually win an event. Like, I'd rather know that if I was a pleb, right? Telling me that team's number 4 is irrelevant if number 4 is what it was last year and it's like G2 and that's like, right, you either fluke the event or you do nothing. Like, I'd rather know, is this team like if the number 4 team is pretty close to number 1 team, like, wow, that's a big deal. You, like, tell me that instead of just telling me the number 4. So what they do instead is they just do tiers. And so what they've been doing is, and this is why it worked, is the only team that they had as S tier, which for some bizarre reason was the top tier in Korean StarCraft, the only S tier team was Astralis. And then what they did was, in terms of A tier, which is the tier below S, they had a whole bunch in there. So there was like Na'Vi, FaZe, Mouse, they were all in that tier. And so that makes a lot more sense than just a pure ranking. Now, what I'm going to do personally is, as usual, this is what you do with good ideas. I'm just going to take the good ones and I'm just going to put them both into one. So I'm going to do my top 10 ranking, but it's going to be top 10 and it's going to have the tiers in as well. So it's going to tell you both, because the downside of the Esports Kingdom one, obviously, is they don't rank them. So now what they're telling you is, if there's like 6 teams in tier A, well, which one's better? Well, obviously they're not all equally good, are they? So the flaw there is they've what's stupid is they've thrown out one set of criteria and then fallen into the mistake of their own criteria. So I'm going to add both together. But I think that's a pretty good way of describing it at the moment. Like, there's no logical reason why Astralis should lose to anyone at the moment. Which, to be fair, doesn't mean they will win. Because if you know anything about Counter-Strike, unfortunately, turns of form just change overnight. Like, I don't know why anyone still acts as though they can read the future. Like, it's not just fans here. There are so many people in this business who love to get like an old tweet and be like, haha, you said this team would win. Yeah, I don't claim to be able to
40 years ago.
I'll just go ahead and tell you right now, I can't read the future. Difference is, when you all get one of these right, you pretend like you could. You don't just say like, I had a hunch, or here's some cool reasons. You actually pretend like, oh, I knew they were going to win. No one knows shit. You know why? Because no one knows what's going to happen in the future. And going off the past is a fairly weak correlation between what happens in the future based on what happens in the past.
Fairly simplistic saying, match always has to be played.
Because the thing is, when you stop being number 1, that literally does happen overnight. Like, it's not a gradual tune down on that. Now, if you're amazing, stop being number 1 might still mean you're number 2 and number 3, but the difference is the drop off can be massive. So when you stop winning, you just stop winning. So the downside there as well would obviously be if Astralis came in way worse form. But that's actually the one thing I've been impressed with them as a team, actually, is that it wasn't that they just blazed the first event. They've generally been super duper at all these events. And then also you add in, if anything, this is something of a weakened field for a massive international tournament. So I could even see whether they're as good or not. This could just keep that streak going. And by the way, people are going to be so salty if they win this event, because first of all, it not only puts them at the same, like then them and FaZe are both one title away from that, like, fucking Grand Slam thing, so then the match is really on. But then secondly,
actually,
it's already an era. You can't even talk shit.
I think FaZe has to win this one, or they drop back to 2 wins, because the time frame is only lasting.
I believe they have to win this and the next one. They have to win this and DreamHack Stockholm, I think, were the 2 events they had to win.
That could be, yeah.
But you might be right. But yes, eventually what happens is ESL New York from last year runs out. So at that point, I think their chances are just done. I think they have to win 2 out of the next 3 or something like that. Or maybe it's 2 out of the next 2. But whatever the scenario is, I don't know why people are building that. Well, like, I get it because they're the 1 on 3, but it's really more about whether Astralis loses the tournament. Since if Astralis wins, you're not getting any titles anywhere.
Yep.
That was a cool little piece of trivia there. I actually forgot about the Grand Slam.
I don't think anybody really cares about it, do they?
Money is money.
They do now that they've got 3 titles.
Yeah. I mean,
money is money, my friend.
Like, it is a $3 million.
Yeah.
It is strange how little hype there is for such a big amount of money.
Well, that's just because, unfortunately, no team got to 3. Like, you have to realize they would have already kicked in place the whole narrative around that ages ago. Because remember, FaZe could literally have won it already. They've been in enough finals for those tournaments. They just blew like 3 of them in a row, something mental. So sadly, whoever would have gotten to 3, I assume they would have started up like video production. Like, you get like a storyline. Like,
G2 had it.
Like, G2 only ever had 2 titles, I think, didn't they?
Oh yeah.
I think they only had 1 title, actually.
Someone kept tweeting about how many kept track. Like, I forgot, but someone on my Twitter kept count on how many people had 2 wins, 1 wins, like every.
As far as I know, I think G2 only had 1 from Malmo, because the problem is I believe that they started the Intel Grand Slam after they won EPL. I think that's correct.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, I don't think EPL counted for them, or if it did, it run out long ago now.
No, it wouldn't have counted.
So yeah, that's the only real problem there. Because remember, there was a whole system built into it, which actually now might get activated, because if Astralis win, both FaZe and Astralis not only can beat each other and win the Grand Slam, but they get like the spoiler money for fucking the other one over. So that was, remember, the other part, which is actually a clever part to the format. Because what it then means is, this is the part people never stop to think about, is the problem so far is it's not activated because you don't have a team with 3 wins. But as soon as you get one with 3, which actually should have happened by now, it's just that there was so many events spread out, and obviously FaZe is losing them to NIP, to Fnatic, teams that aren't going to win more of the titles, that you basically just delayed how long it was anyone could get to 3. But as soon as you get to 3, it becomes incentivized for everyone else as well, because they're all getting the like 100k you get for spoiling when you beat the team in the final. So that actually is a pretty cool narrative. I think it's a pretty good idea. It's not like it changes the tournament. The tournament's still the tournament. So there's literally no negative to it existing.
They literally have a bounty on their head.
I think it's a pretty cool idea.
It will determine if Astralis can get over their choking issues when the pressure is really on.
They don't have them anymore.
$1 million. Yeah.
Well, that's also the other factor is, like, at the moment, no one has actually made them choke. Like, I don't think you can really count that FaZe final as a choke. It was such an epic final for both teams. You know, it's one of the only 3-0s I've seen where legit the other team almost 3-0'd themselves. It's quite ridiculous in that sense. But yeah, that's actually the big problem. Because funnily enough, this is one of those things that'll get missed. But if you remember back when the Astralis with Kirby got really good, I actually even said when they started winning tournament titles that the teams that were the most dangerous for them was like Virtus.pro, SK Gaming, because these are the teams that famously they can't make you choke, but they can create the circumstances where they're not choking. So you're in a position where you have to perform. So the big problem is there is not a single team in Counter-Strike right now who fits that bill.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty much.
There's none, because think about it. Like, NIP's gone, Virtus.pro's gone. MIBR may as well be gone. Like, I don't really know what hope people hold out for them, especially after this last tournament. Like, this just shows you how some people are, like the term that I have from other games, like in this case Counter-Strike royalty. The reason why I say Counter-Strike royalty, right, is if you're just a commoner, you're just another top player who's just had a normal career, when you become shit, people will never shut the fuck up about the fact that you're shit, about the fact that you can't win. It's like they think they're the ones that are beating you. They're not. They're just a pleb watching the game like everyone else. But they will talk mad shit to you, right? Who's talking mad shit on SK after that event in Brazil? Everyone's just cool with them making top 4 at a tournament with no top teams except Team Liquid in attendance of real lineups. And they finished behind 2 teams with stand-ins on home soil and with the same crowd that everyone's literally filleting every 10 seconds, supposedly giving you magical powers. And everyone's just cool with them finishing top 4, are they? Like, I don't know about you, but I'm not cool with that. Like, that shows what absolute garbage this lineup is.
Maybe they're at the final stage of grief and they just accepted the fact that they're bad now.
Oh, what's brilliant is I've seen quite a few people on Reddit actually suggest, even if it's just as an idea, like, oh, maybe they were just sandbagging the last few months because SK has been mean to them. Right, so your premise is that even though you would gain nothing from doing this, you're just going to give up money, titles, respect, like, just let people just literally dick in your face and then have to shake their hand and say, well played. But meanwhile, the whole time, you're like, but this is sick because I'm actually letting them win, but they don't know. And then what you're going to do is, when you come to this new org, start winning and then go, see SK, I'm really good. It's like, well, here's the thing, right? Logically, why would SK give a fuck? You were so bad at the end. Sound, you didn't accomplish anything there. That just shows how far like fan mentalities can go. Because I remember probably the best equivalent for an equally ludicrous premise was when all that Flusher cheating clip was going on. Because I know one of the reasons why people bailed so hard on that, and they don't to this day say that he cheats or that they suspected him or whatever. And the real reason why is because a lot of the people pushing that shit were fucking NIP fans whose real hope was, NIP actually never got worse, everyone else just started cheating. That was literally a working theory that some of these people had. And they literally thought, right, so Fnatic's obviously cheating, because if you remember, it wasn't just Flusher. There was Flusher had most of the clips, then actually Crims and Olaf had a couple of clips. Then you had LDLC, where Kiyashima had like transferred all his skins instantly. So that immediately just looked like, right, put him on the list.
Well,
and then
Kaylee did got banned.
Yeah, he was on Titan though, but to be too fair, yeah. You had Kaylee obviously got banned. But yeah, the point is, in that scenario, like, that had no foundation to it. But what it does is it allows someone who's delusional to just extend their delusion a little bit before reality catches up. And eventually, it's always going to catch up. You're going to get enough things happen that you can't explain it away.
Yeah.
Right, let's do another topic then.
Okay.
Can we jump off of the MIBR to another MIBR topic? So Lerpy said a recent article saying that no esports team is able to monetize esports, and basically citing the examples of players getting 25k a month per player. And
okay,
one can understand that probably MIBR will be paying at least that, and if it's a team that's not doing very well.
Let's ask Shanghai Dragons in the Overwatch League how that turned out to be.
But is there a solution for this? Is this just like a huge gamble and like no team will ever be profitable for the next 10 years? Like, is there a solution for this?
It depends how like everything blows up or not. Like if it goes mainstream, guess what? Sponsors will come in even more. Maybe it will be sustainable. Who knows?
But how is no one figuring it out? Yeah.
I don't know. I guess.
What do you mean by figuring it out?
It's basically saying how to make money off esports fans, enough to cover the expenses, of course. That was Lerpy's premise, that no one is able to do that.
It's kind of a hard one to...
Yeah, exactly. Whenever there's a scenario like that, like no one can do something, I think it's unreasonable to start with the premise of like everyone's an idiot and can't figure it out. It's usually the opposite. It's like someone has to invent something totally new, because if anything, what you've seen is this is what's silly about esports at the moment, okay, is that a big part of why there's this insane push of money into esports the last like 2 years isn't because esports was on an upward trajectory and we're just riding up where it should be relative to the rest of like the esports industry. It's because unfortunately, what the genius move was, this is why I never thought esports would actually get to the level it is now or where it's going to be in like 2 years, is because actually like the fan interaction and amount of money you can make from them doesn't warrant it. So I thought, right, it'll have to sort of like prove every marker on the way up and then it'll get there. So I thought 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, that's a more reasonable time span. Now, unfortunately, what I couldn't have accounted for, which I think is the main reason why esports is massive now, is everything else in culture dying and not being able to make money off anything else. Because you can't make money from a newspaper or from having fucking TV shows, or you can't even make money nowadays from a Star Wars movie if you do it wrong. Like the amount of things that are no longer a surefire hit are unbelievable. And yet, in all these fields, there's not really anything you can do to the NFL to make it more popular. Like, it's kind of had its time, and I know people don't want to hear that, but it was basically just a really long version of the Pokemon card game. It's just it happened to get a solid 70 years or something, you know. The difference is the card game fad had 5 years or something, you know. So the problem is the notion these things lasted forever doesn't make any sense anyway. They haven't even been around a few hundred years. So some of these things could have risen and fallen. You know, one day maybe the NFL will just be like darts is now. It'll be a league and it'll have its own interest, but it won't be number one and it won't be able to contend for number one. So my problem is I feel like a lot of media aspects have been foisted. People have kind of put their attention onto esports just because they think it's the savior, but they don't realize, funnily enough, that esports has a limitation none of those sports have, which is it doesn't have a monetization model. And one thing we can almost certainly say at the moment is that you can't use the traditional sports monetization model. Like, actually, people don't seem interested in pay-per-view. People, especially because, remember, the disingenuous part about pay-per-view and esports so far is every pay-per-view option I've ever seen, except for, I think, when MLG did those, like, MLG arenas where you had to pay just to watch the event entirely, like there was no free option. Mm-hmm. Except for that, every other pay-per-view option is how I would structure it. It's like the way you convince the person to get the pay-per-view is they get something extra they don't get otherwise.
No.
Now, that is not the pay-per-view option in any sport I'm aware of. Any sport that runs on pay-per-view, it's pay-per-view. You can't watch it at all unless you pay. Like, you have to pay is the barrier from day one to get in the door and watch that particular sport. So I think that's a problem in and of itself, is like, we don't even have the basic traditional models that work for everyone else. So you can definitely still make it, but the problem is at this point in time, it's like having to have someone invent something entirely new. So if someone does it, guess what? They'll be fucking insanely rich, and they will be the person who probably rides the first 10 years and makes billions of dollars, I've no doubt. But I don't know what it's going to be. It's hard to figure out, really.
I guess one thing that is nice about esports is that like, thinking of esports as like a monolith, like it seems like it would have more long-lasting appeal because new games come up all the time to add to the blob that is esports, quote unquote. So it's not like the NFL where it's just one game, and if the game gets less popular, then it's done. So I don't know.
There's no like esports portal. Like, it's subreddit has their own subreddit, and you can't even. I mean, I think like recently there was a top 10 casters in esports, obviously biased and so on. But I really like to see it, but there isn't that much content like that. And if there is, it will be just flamed all the way.
Yeah, but that's also why it doesn't really make any sense to say like esports generally, though, because they're not really all contributing to each other in that sense.
Yeah.
Like, the overlap isn't that much, which is also a concern for me, because I actually think it makes it easier for people to leave following the sport, because if their game starts to get less popular or their team retires, they can just say, right, I'm just out, I'm quitting, like, I don't like this new game, I'm done forever. Whereas the difference is, like, if you've ever invested a serious amount of time into any traditional sports league, there might be seasons you're not that into it, or maybe your team isn't that good, but you'll always at least check back in, and part of you is always waiting for like the hook to bring you back in for a season or two. And so I think that's also a flaw as compared to traditional sports. I think it's easier to kind of bail on it. And so the upside is you could bring in a new fan, but I also think keeping the same fans is going to be hard, because I already see fans complain about their esports game, League of Legends, CS, whatever it might be, and say, oh, it's gotten boring now. It's like, it hasn't really. You're just bored with it, which fair enough. Okay, go do something else with your life. But, you know, we can't just radically change the game just so you enjoy watching it all of a sudden. Whereas in every sport, you can stick to the game for a long time.
League did, and probably they screwed themselves over with the
new meta?
Yeah. I mean, I haven't played the game myself in a bit, and now I look at it, like the first game was amazing, Hammer doing ADC, let's go. But now it's just, I don't know what's going on. Like, I can't predict, okay, you know, Kingzone will win for sure because I know they're better, and I know what they're going to do when these are the win conditions. It's just, I have no idea what's going on. I've
watched 2 games in LCK, and I can tell you already, half the fucking teams don't even know what the fuck's going on.
Yeah.
Like, that's how bad it is.
Coma doesn't know what's going on. So how am I supposed to know what's going on?
The brilliant mastermind. Yeah.
I mean, that was kind of like the persistent problem in Overwatch League with all the fucking patch changes that we're doing. Like, you know, they would do a radical change and they would put it on a patch that literally was never played on live. It's like nobody knows what they're doing. That's what's kind of been frustrating about that game for me is like there's been no stability in terms of the meta. So I don't know.
The sad thing is, I actually think that the League of Legends one is a good example of just unfortunately the fact that the game itself is very limited. Because I always used to wonder that when I first came into watching League of Legends, and I had like some very brief experience with Dota, I couldn't believe how ridiculously streamlined the game was. It was literally, like, people think this is a joke. It's literally like someone took Dota and said, right, that's way too hard. We've got to make this as easy as fuck. Like, there's got to be like 3 things you play for this role. This role better never interact with this role. Like, this role on the bottom of the map has to have champions that are nothing to do with the top lane ones, so that we don't get people who have to learn 50 matchups. You know, they're just going to learn 4 matchups, and if they can do that, they can play. And they might not be the best, but they can play. They have a chance, okay? Right? In that scenario, like, to me, what's mad is the current meta at the moment is more like what you would find in Dota, where people can be incredibly creative with what they do, and you can change all your matchup. And as a result, a factor that is massively valuable at the moment, that has always been insanely valuable in Dota, is how versatile one of your players is, which doesn't mean he can play 4 heroes instead of 3 in the old League of Legends sense. It means this guy can literally play something that we also play at, like the carry position, and so you don't know yet where this is going in the draft, and he can put it, you know, that sort of versatility. The downside is, I think League is just not a very well-designed game. And so, unfortunately, when you try to do something very open-ended like that, you just reveal how busted the game is, unfortunately. And League, I have to say, I've never seen a game, maybe ever in esports, where they not only seemingly don't have a problem with, but they seem to embrace things being super broken. And they always use the same logic of sort of like, first of all, they just do like the denial. No, it's not broken. I haven't seen any evidence. Then when the evidence is like overwhelming, they'll be like, we already knew it was a problem. We're tweaking it, you know. And then, unfortunately, as we all know, there's never such a thing as like a reasonable nerf. All they do is they're like, nerf that into the ground and then start with something else, make that super OP. And the same cycle just spins up again and continues on. And then, unfortunately, what does muddy the water is then you add in the plebs who just want to always say that everything's broken that they don't like, which, to be fair, that's like signal noise. But if you just took only the experts, I think you'd find generally the thread of stuff being broken and then cycling out it's pretty continuous. So I don't even necessarily blame anyone outright for the problems of the League meta. Like, the premise isn't terrible. It's just that the execution is, because I don't think that game can accommodate what they're trying to do at the moment.
There's probably somebody out there still who thinks that Akali is overpowered.
The sad thing about it is, though, here's an upside. Here's like a one bright spot that I don't think anyone's thought of. Is that in a world where this actually finally does stabilize, and you can still play a lot of different things, but like people get a sense of like, you know, if they have a comp like that, here's how we balance against it, you know, like that sort of competitive intra-meta understanding develops, is the real upside that no one's thinking of is this could actually bring back true carry players. Because the difference is, okay, so think of my favorite player, a player who's been at a position that is maligned. You can't be a carry all the time. Well, the difference is you could in this meta. Like, if you actually set your team up, as we've seen with people like Huni, you could just have Huni at all times be a carry player, and you can change what lane he plays in, you can change what champion he plays, and as a result, I actually think if it remained very open-ended like this, you could manipulate it. So actually, the funny thing is, you wouldn't need to bench someone like Faker. You would just pick him and go, right, I'm going to make you the focal point of the team still out to the others that I'm going to make versatile, and 2 of them are going to play supports. We're going to do this over here, you know. The only thing is, though, I think the final detail I'll say on the League one, which shows what a bad game it is, unfortunately, is when the Dota meta became massively wide open and you developed that like tri-lane and all these interesting little nuances, which then continued on for many years, that's it. You also changed up like where you played on the map and the way the pressure on the map was balanced. That's the one part I don't understand about League at the moment, is that you've changed all the champion pools and you can play champions in all these different lanes, but people are still going in the same lanes. Like, that's the part that I don't understand. That's the part that I think's a bit off. Is like, there must just be something about the way the map works where you have to just still have the same people in the same lanes, which is sad, because actually the one part I'll say about Riot in the early days which before I knew they were lying, sounded cool, was they used to always say, like, we didn't set the meta and we will never, like, demand people play the meta a certain way, which is a complete rank lie if you look at the way they behaved. But the premise is a good one, because it absolutely should not be unreasonable for someone to just be like, oh, you know what, I'm just an amazing Vlad ADC player. But I'm talking about 3 years ago. Like, that should have been absolutely legit. If you could make it work, then you should be able to change the meta like that. It's just that, unfortunately, you couldn't in their game because it was incredibly limited, I think.
Yep. Unfortunate. I think a lot of that is because of the summer spells, probably, right? Or the items, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that those are like that. That's another area that people don't even look at. Sadly, this is why no esports game is actually amazing, because every esports game has like avenues you could go down that was so interesting, and then they just lock them off immediately. And then the worst thing is, I've noticed this is just part of the human condition, because people do it with politics. There are people where if you ask them, like in isolation, what are your political views of the world? Like, how would you like society to be structured? How would you like your life to be structured? What they might give you as ideals are nowhere near whoever they support as a political party. But the real reason why is because, first of all, they kind of know, like, no one's going to represent all my ideals. So immediately they're already compromising before they've even come to look for someone to support. And then secondly, there's definitely a component in people where if they can, they want to somehow rationalize whatever's happening as like all right now, even if it's not that good, because they're powerless to change it. It's one of the reasons why I when I was very young, I never understood, because I obviously always had kind of like a rebellious attitude to the world. So I never understood why other people would see something that's objectively shit for them and just be like, it's all right, I'm sure they're doing their best. I'd be like, what the fuck? No, they can't be. Look, they're doing an objectively terrible job. And what I realized is that I can't change the scenario. The person can't change the scenario. So for their own mental health, they just kind of go, I'm sure there's some reason, and just put it out of mind. So it's clearly a useful mechanism, but unfortunately, when you apply it to games, you just don't explore any of the interesting shit. So yeah, I would absolutely say that in a game like League of Legends, if you really want to change the meta and you're doing what Riot claim, first things first, get rid of summoner spells, make that like some sort of ability that you get on level 6 of the game, you know, whatever it might be, add it in that way. Because that to this day is probably the stupidest part of League of Legends, is that you took the fucking Blink Dagger, gave it to every single person, and now wonder why every character doesn't work anymore in your game. Because all the no joke, if you go look at like the last 20 heroes champions they added to League, something like 19 out of 20 have like a fucking gap closer. So hence, I wonder why all the season 1 champions aren't viable anymore when you have a flash and a gap changer. Or if you like that Zoe character, you have like about 4 flashes. Like, what is this shit? You know, so unfortunately, you're going to ruin the entire game when you do that. Whereas there's a logic in Dota as to how fast you can move, where the danger. In fact, that's one of the things that makes Dota very cool, actually, is that as the game goes on and the heroes get more and more powerful, that's where you see like the sort of threat zone of how close you can be to someone like goes huge. So now someone can like zoom in on you out of nowhere, out of all the trees, and just like, and then they get you in a mad gank from nowhere, you know. Whereas in League, it's always like the same radius roughly, isn't it? So your brain tells you it's not exciting until he gets closer than that.
You get 4-staffed, and then you blink in with a pudge hook, and they do like the old fashioned, like the fountain hook. What was that, TI3 that they did that Na'Vi abused that? I think it was TI3. That was funny, but they took it out. But that was probably a good idea, but it was funny at the time.
That was a good one.
But isn't doing this like in the summer split, and not, you know, you're risking sending to Worlds like Griffin or whatever instead of a proper team with Legacy and so on. And the same in other.
You'll have to explain the premise, mate. What do you mean you're risking? Like, you mean Riot?
Yeah, so Riot, you know, there's teams like, okay, SKT wasn't doing great, but, you know, they could still reasonably go to Worlds, and now they're completely lost. And we have in first place Griffin, which if they win, they're automatically guaranteed to go to Worlds.
They were the challenger team that rose up, right?
What's the problem here?
Well, it's basically, you know, all the people that watched because they recognize the good names from, you know, playing ADC, from Faker playing mid. Now they're seeing Faker playing Taric or benched, and he's not even at Worlds, and it's these Griffins guys. And maybe it's fine.
Meta changes, people change.
Okay, I mean, maybe I'm just too resistant to change, but it just seems too risky for me. If you're such a big esport, to risk throwing away so many good narratives and players.
Narratives can always be made new.
I mean, I can kind of understand not wanting to do that in the middle of the season. Like at the beginning of the season,
It's
I think
the start of a new season, so why not?
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I can kind of understand not wanting to do that like right after MSI or something.
Let's see if Coma is really this magical genius that can work without Faker and having the best player in the world like pop off every game. And let's see if he can do it. You know, like if he doesn't have all the best players.
If anything, they've given a great excuse to SK Telecoms. I don't think they were going to make Worlds regardless. I don't think it even matters if
Probably
the meta
not.
changed. So sadly, if anything, I'd rather it was the old meta so they could just fail the old-fashioned way and then everyone could shut the fuck up about saying they're going to win Worlds every year. Because it's not really that reasonable, is it?
Yeah, the dynasty will be over, unfortunately.
Couldn't we already shut up about that? Because I'm pretty sure SKT lost that one last season already.
No, because unfortunately, people will always use the logic of like, yes, but in the past they rallied to make the Worlds. You know, like you can never defeat narratives. Unfortunately, that's why I made my show just about killing narratives. There's a main reason to come back to League of Legends. Well, that and the fact that Kelsey Moser just got fucking fired or whatever. So I had to go and drag that ass out of the fire, didn't I? Like a motherfucking hero. Definitely love that, by the way. Just being told 24/7, admittedly by people who don't matter, so to fair, it's not that big a deal. But just being told 24/7 that I'm some like rampant misogynist. Meanwhile, I literally took time out of my weekly life to make like $20 an episode, helping two girls who were fired from their jobs have an actual fucking presence in the scene by giving them some extra content to do. But yep, cheers. I'll just keep taking that on the chin every fucking week of my life, shall I? Whatever. Luckily, that's actually the one scenario in which people will never realise why it's actually a good thing that people like me and Richard are in the position we're in. It's because like, we're basically built for war. That's what we were just always about. So if you wanted some people to clash head on with all the morons coming into esports now, with exactly the people you want as the gatekeepers, isn't it?
I kind of want Sir Scoots as a gatekeeper, man.
He is to some degree, but
And Paul Chalsner.
the only downside
Calling out
is
the mainstream media on their.
the downside is Scoots has actually chilled out a lot now that he's retired. Like I've noticed he's got a lot less angry. He's just enjoying life too much, you know, and that enjoying life actually yields like an inverse correlation to being really good at wrecking people in esports.
I mean, you can't always be Darth Vader. Like,
I guess you must be really not liking life then.
It's more I just don't like the esports life. So that's what I body.
that's why you go always on vacation.
Do you see a future that there is space for more content in esports? Like basically, you know, Kelsey Moser is one of the top esports journalists. Even Travis is, you know, one of the most recognizable top esports journalists in one of the biggest games, and they still struggle to make a good.
Isn't he just a mouthpiece for Riot?
Regardless, I think it's very strange that these people can't make enough money when, you know, a pro CS player can make so much money. Like, how is the drop off so big for people who contribute to create the scene? Okay, journalism is dying globally, but shouldn't it be a bigger pool of money to distribute to journalists? Or is this just not
Might be because most of them are starting to become incompetent in their jobs and reporting fake
starting
shit.
to is pretty generous.
I am generous sometimes. Not always.
Unfortunately, like, first of all, the problem is, like, players, as we've just discussed earlier, or at least touched on, don't make an amount that's actually reasonable. Like, they make an amount that is absolutely unreasonable based on market inflation, people being willing to pay more than the other person. So, unfortunately, that number is mad inflated. So, here's the thing. Journalists can definitely make a good living. It's just like, first of all, they have to have a massive output. Like, your output has to be really, really high. You can't be like the old days where people did like 3 things in a month. You will just starve if you do that. Or you'll make like $600 a month and you'll be in bad shape, put it that way.
Hope you come by like on like cup noodles every day.
But so first of all, that's like the first hurdle people have to clear if they want to do it. You have to be able to produce a lot of quantity, basically. And then also there's the factor that most of the sites, the models that the sites all used haven't really survived. Like if you look at the moment where people are writing, so people write for like HTC, well, that's literally just a company with sponsorship that's got money to blow. Like they're not necessarily trying to make the money back off the articles you write for them. That's all marketing. It's an adjunct of their budget. You've got If you notice, most top writers don't write for .esports, actually. .esports has its own, it basically just does news and it has its own staff. Like, I write for them just because I have my own deal with them, but that's like the only one. If you notice, they actually passed on most of those other people. I recommended them all to them, but listen, you can't really complain. That guy actually is killing it in business. So if he knows better than me, if that person's worth the money, he knows better than me. So most of them write for sort of like smaller outlets that just pay them on a freelance basis and won't commit to paying them full time. So the bigger issue for me is I feel like it's just the scene in general that's in a bad spot. I don't really know how you get out there. Because here's the thing that people don't realize is it's not that anyone replaced them. Like, as much as people talk about clickbait, we don't actually have that much clickbait in esports. Like, there aren't that many people doing tons of small articles. The only people I'll say I think do it is maybe the score, and I don't actually think the score even does it on purpose. I think what they do there is, because sometimes they have those pieces where like the title sounds great, you know, like Story of Guardian, and you click it like, oh, fucking hell, let's find, oh, look, this isn't even like the most rudimentary story of Guardian. What you find there is, that isn't actually someone just who's not using their time. It's probably just someone who, maybe they only got in a CS 3 years ago, you know, and they're doing their best, but they had to cobble together something. Maybe they had a time span of 3 days. They're not going to watch like 700 VODs in that time. They just did what they could, you know. They've done a very basic version, and it's probably for the most casual fan anyway. So generally, I think the industry is just in a terrible space at the moment, and most people have just not figured out how to navigate around it. Whereas if you notice, one of the things I've actually always done is try to create lots of different avenues that you can spend your time in, and then you just pivot based on what you're doing. So at the moment, for example, I don't have a video sponsor at the moment. Hence, I'm going to do more writing. I'm going to pivot on a different angle. And then you keep your foot in all of them, though, so that then when you need to pivot again, you can pivot again. So, yeah.
Seems like it's kind of a consequence of what we were talking about earlier about how esports is kind of like atomized, where it's really easy for somebody to just kind of drop out of the scene. Because, I mean, Richard just talked about that, too, about how he like doesn't want to do it anymore.
Well, if you think about it, the other problem also is, again, it all comes back to the same issue with why the teams aren't profitable. You can't get fans to spend the money. Yeah. Because if you think about it, like okay, so from being in like I wouldn't really say I'm in this world, but I read the news, so I guess I know about it. Like the anti-SJW world. If you look at SJWs and anti-SJWs, they all survive on fucking Patreon donations. This is no exaggeration.
Yep.
Some of them have, though, like 20k a month Patreons.
What?
Or some of them that are smaller have them where it's like 5k a month. Now, what that means, by the way, is not that like there's 700,000 people watching those. There definitely is not. But what there is they have a massive amount of their active fan base who, because it's politicized material, and these are people that they're supporting down partisan lines, or even if they don't, like, it's not like they're necessarily on the same side, they're against the same enemy. Because it's got that sort of unifying effect, people are way more likely to pay to support the person they support, because they're like, I don't want this person to like not be able to do the content. We've got to battle the insert either SJWs or anti-SJWs. We've got to battle these people. This is a war. And so as a result, people will pay, a whole bunch of people will pay $100 a month. A whole bunch of people will pay $50 a month. Whereas in esports, if you notice, there haven't been that many successful Patreons from journalists. Like Richard had one, I've got one. I think Travis's is like, I'll double check now. I think his is maybe like 1,000 or something. I don't think his was that good from what I remember.
Yeah, it's like that. It's like 1,200 or something.
Let's have a look. Yeah. What it is.
Meanwhile, we're struggling to get 2,500 for like Richard.
His is 1,600, yes. Which is actually one of the reasons why I never thought personally that by the numbers one would ever actually make it. Like, I thought that was ridiculous to think it would get to 2,500 for literally just 4 episodes of the show. We don't give you any extra features. Like, there's no extra show at the end of the month. You get 4.
Yeah, so, we watch your content for years, and you know it's also like part dead. Whereas if it's Overwatch, it's like it's a new game. Who will pay for an Overwatch Patreon when you know a guy out of uni can write some articles that are alpha good? Just no one.
Yeah, I don't know. It seems like almost with
like I'm looking here. So Sargon of Akkad is a pretty famous guy in like the anti-SJW world. Like his Patreon is $8,000 a month, 8,300. And by the way, he does one of those ones where I think all you can do is pay $1. You don't even do like reward tiers. You just support him for $1.
$1.
No, you can pay more, but you don't get more rewards basically.
Oh, okay. Well, it's something like that anyway. Because I remember his was one that someone recommended to me. when I was saying like I didn't really want to do one because I didn't want to be like beholden to pleb fans thinking like I had to do some content because they said so. And someone basically suggested his and was like, oh, you should look at the way he's doing it because it's like you just support him basically, and then it's not really about getting like mad extra shit. Just
look at Jordan Peterson. Supposedly he's making like 80K a month. Like it's insane.
How is he making 80K a month?
What? He's got like
called the power law.
He's got almost 10,000 patrons.
Winner takes all. Yeah.
That's pretty sick.
Yeah,
that's pretty impressive. So anyway, the point is
you subscribe to this Patreon and you paid for it.
Like the part that's a bit depressing is that these people aren't supported, because the sad thing is, like, I know all of them haven't tried it, but I have to say, if I had to guess, sadly, I think if like Emily Rand, Kelsey Moser, Stu Chu, if these people made their own Patreon, because one of the big flaws those people have is they haven't really been able to market their individual brand as heavily as some of the other people. I think they would literally get like $600, $900 a month each, and part of that would be like people who actually like them in the industry doing $100. So unfortunately, I don't think that they would make it just on the Patreon donation. Like, here's the thing, that might actually even help their careers. Like, that added to the freelance money, it's probably enough. Yeah, I mean, it's probably enough already. It's just that one of the things about being an esports journalist is you have to accept in your mind, same thing as a pro player 10 years ago, right? If this is a fun enough thing to do and you want to do it, then it's not like, is this a good enough living to do? It's the other way around. It's like, can I make any living doing it? If I can, then I'll do it. Like, no one ever sat down 15 years ago and went, right, so if I was to win every tournament, I'd only make this much and my salary. No, they went the other way. They went, wait a minute, I can get paid anything to play games. Well, of course I'll take it. Like, we'll see where that goes from there. If I'm still into it from 2 years, maybe it has to be a bit more. But it wasn't like a career move, so it never really made sense from that angle.
Yeah. And
the famous story of like Dennis winning that Ferrari and making a living off of Quakes, like, every child's dream who heard that is like, I can make money playing video games? What? It's like, yeah, you can, maybe, if you're good enough.
The funny thing is, though, no one ever mentions that, which is that it's not like it's just recently, but Travis has had some problems with his content for years now. Like the last 2 or 3 years, it's had issues getting
it's the same guests,
raw always. Numbers. No, it's just, it's like... I feel like his audience has gotten more niche or something, or people, sadly, this is another fact. I think people just don't care as much about like post game from just like one player after a week of LCS, which unfortunately for him, I think is just the downside of being in League of Legends. Because if it's a tournament in Counter-Strike, of course you want to hear an interview after the whole tournament. But the fact that LCS is week to week, who really gives a shit? Especially because one of the worst parts of LCS is there's always been such a mad disparity in teams that you get so many dull weeks where it's like, right, my team's playing 2 of the bottom 40. Who gives a shit? Like that's why the narrative never made sense in LCS of like, oh, this team is 0-2, but can they pick it up this week? Well, are they playing the worst team in the league? Yes. Well, then they will be picking up, won't they? Like, they didn't change anything, you cretin. They didn't get together and have like a spiritual healing and an intervention and figure out new tactics for the game. They're just playing a worse team now. And what's that? The first week they played, did they play the top 2 teams in the first week? Well, then they're probably 0-2 for good reason, like in a relative sense, it doesn't actually matter in that respect. That's also though why esports fans will never be able to handle power rankings, because the power ranking has nothing to do with who the best is. It's just how you did in this last week. And sadly, I know everyone else hasn't picked up on this for so long, but first of all, the LoL esports guy who hasn't worked there for years now, that Frank Fields, he even fully admitted that they used to want controversy in their power rankings. So they used to explicitly make them fucked up so that you idiots would be like, this is fucked up. It's like the second you type the tweet, this is fucked up, or this is terrible, you have immediately given them engagement for that post. Thanks. They have gotten the only thing they needed from you, which is a click and some engagement. You have given them everything they wanted, which is the reason why in every sport they will always push power. I don't do it myself because I just don't find that interesting, Like, yeah, no shit, the team that won all the games this week's top of the power ranking. I mean, I could figure that out myself. Like, the only area it's vaguely interesting in is you do get an expert to sort of figure out for you, like, these 2 teams went 1-1, who had the better schedule, or, that sometimes that can be vaguely interesting. But I feel like there's a better way to do it, a better format than a power ranking. I think power rankings are just good at drawing in raw hits, though. Same as another way you can draw in raw hits that is super popular is like that dumb shit that ESPN just did, where you do an imaginary bracket where games or players from games in an imaginary, in your brain sense, play against each other based only on you voting. Now that's got to be up there with when the TV show that has no interest in your opinion says, tweet in your opinion to us at this. Right, you then pay a cost of the tweet of the SMS rather, which then goes to their budget. And they just take all that money, put it in their pocket, and at the end just read like 2 of your comments like, oh, Bill from Norfolk says, why don't we just bloody join the European Union again? Well, interesting, Bill. We'll think about that in the show. Like, they don't at all. They just took millions off all you fools thinking that you were being part of the show.
Ever because like, oh, who of you two has the biggest fan base to promote to? Okay, you probably will win. Like, come on.
No, but it got so many people on board. Think about how many times you saw a thread on Reddit that was like, we got to help all of Meister to beat this guy. Have we though? Have we really? Isn't it just an imaginary thing that means fucking nothing to anyone? I don't feel like we've got to help anyone do shit. It's all just imaginary, isn't it? Don't worry about it. Doesn't mean anything, does it?
I don't know. I almost feel like part of the problem with esports in general is the fact that they're like, isn't as much tribalism in it as like other sports, because like other sports
we have Brazilians.
Well, yeah, I mean,
you want tribalism, like
but I mean,
what do you mean tribalism then?
I'm trying to think it out in my head. Basically, like the point that you had earlier about like people wanting to support the SJW or anti-SJW people on Patreon. You know, they had something like invested in it, like it's a fight, and it seems like there isn't as much of that in esports to the point where like it's like there aren't like as many rabid fans. I feel like in a way.
Sure.
I don't know.
It definitely doesn't help that the turnover of players between teams is massive though.
Yeah. I mean that's probably a reason why.
Because I never understood myself in sports. As in, this is another one of those like mechanisms of speech that people just refuse to learn and understand the difference between. When I say I don't understand, I mean like my brain will never work this way. I am aware of this concept and that it exists, that people like to support a team. Perhaps their father supported that team. Perhaps they have always supported this one team. Perhaps it is the local team of theirs. I am well aware of those mechanisms. The point is that will never work on me. That is why I will never understand why that works. So for me, I never understood in traditional sports why people support a local team, because I always supported teams based on the players they had in the team. And when those players left or they didn't have any good players after, I'd just switch to a different team, or I'd sort of reset for a moment. I'd see the landscape of teams and I'd go, right, who's naturally am I attracted to watching? So personally, I've always done it the way that actually esports fans do it. But I do notice that there does seem to be a lot of friction there. Like you do see a lot of people who are like, oh, I'm a Cloud9 fan, but where the fuck's this team at now? It's like, you think, okay, that's shocking to me. I would have thought you'd be a Stu2K fan, or you'd be a Nothing fan, but it turns out you're not. You're actually a Cloud9 fan. So actually, I agree, it sucks for you because your team can literally overnight be not even the same team. You could have the whole lineup replaced and they can just be way, way worse. Whereas, if you like support like the fucking Green Bay Packers or something, the upside is they're going to keep most of the team for the next few years, and they're going to have some core members for like 15 years that you can just follow, and you can always connect back to that narrative. I get that. So unfortunately, esports is it's not necessarily too far from that. I think stuff like the Overwatch League actually artificially is going to make that happen. You're going to have core players who'll stay a longer time. You've already seen it to some degree in LCS, but definitely in games like CS, I think it's way, way more rare.
Yeah, and I guess the point that I was trying to make, I guess, is it seems like it's easier to monetize that type of person that's like a Cloud9 fan instead of like specific player fan. So that might be part of the reason why esports hasn't been like.
It's probably why Overwatch League went that way, though. It's like they'll probably want to monetize that. Like,
Speaking of Overwatch League, I don't know if any of y'all saw that interview, but Nate Nancer was on an interview with, who was it? Some guy on Fox Business, but he said that Overwatch League actually was profitable in the first year, which is surprising to me.
The problem with that is
be a lie.
Put it this way, why do you think that there are no massive esports interviews with the Blizzard people who run Overwatch League? They don't want to be asked the questions that are uncomfortable questions. Remember, it's not like, I'm not going to invoke the stupid logic of like, if you've got nothing to hide, because that's definitely not the case. But I know, I'll go the other way. I know specifically they have stuff to hide. That's why they do not want to face these questions. Because the immediate follow-up to that question would be, what's the context of that? How is it profitable? Like, what were the expectations set on? Because remember, just from hearing your sentence there, my first assumption there is the entire get out is from the words like this year. So that'll mean like, well, here's the actual like costs and what we made it relative to what it would be for this year. But does that mean it like succeeded as a league? Who the fuck knows? I mean, if they did, this is where I get very suspicious. I get the feeling that when the Overwatch League has any really big tangible results, that they will broadcast some of them. Like if you were making $100 million revenue, why wouldn't you say that when you want people to join your league? Like that would be out public. You wouldn't be doing that as a vague illusion. Like, you know what? Wink, wink. We're very successful in the wink, wink. Or like, why would you be doing that in that scenario? Like you were bragging about, well, you purposely leaked how much it's going to cost for franchise spots and stuff. So it's clear that they're allowed to reveal certain information.
And even that's not true because that's over like a long period of years, apparently.
So yeah, the question there is, what are the costs of the Overwatch League?
Yeah.
Like if he means from Blizzard's end, well, all they did is hold a fucking tournament in LA. Yeah, I'm not surprised.
You got a few millions from them.
And also, who the fuck knows how you break down all the sponsorship deals? Maybe like half the money from Twitch goes to that, and so they're like, boom, we're instantly profitable. I don't know how that works,
Yeah, so that's kind of what I was thinking too. I was like, what do they mean by profitable?
This is where, sadly, though, that is the trend in esports. That this is another reason why developers being involved in games is terrible. Because if you notice, no developer, including Valve, has any accountability whatsoever.
Yeah.
Like you have to understand, people who think that like me or Richard are hostile to game devs hasn't been around long enough to know what game devs are like. It's the other way around. The game dev's default position is like, this is my game, I'm the god of this game, and I run everything, and you better ask my permission to be part of this game. And so when someone like me is like, well, I don't need your permission at all, like I'm totally independent operator, I can do whatever I want in your space, I can shift to another game if I want to.
You're banned from this event.
That they will not meet you halfway and be like, right, well, let's forge a relationship. Like they only tended to do that when the negative element of not doing that hit them so hard that they had to sort of give in a little bit. That's why now, for example, they let Riot casters come on my shows, etc. They sort of took the path of least resistance finally, but they're never going to go the other way and like have like me doing an interview with fucking Ghostcrawler about this meta and what he thinks about it. And the stupid thing about it is, this is exactly where it's like their own guilty conscience tells you that they kind of know that they're either fucking up or they're doing some dodgy shit. Because if I did an interview with some like Riot game dev, I wouldn't be wrecking the guy in the interview. I'd honestly, genuinely be asking him questions. Why did he balance it this way? What were you thinking when you put this thing in place? Like, did it just play out differently? I'd even be asking questions that'd help him, like, are there things you implement that you can never foresee how it'll play out? It'd actually be educational for everyone, you'd hope. But the problem is, because they secretly know, I don't want to answer these questions, or you know what, in the case of the Overwatch League, I mean, my number one reason to be skeptical of the Overwatch League is they launched a league, which I can tell you from day one, they didn't know even the basic day-to-day of how they were going to run it. They figured that all out at the end. They got all the money in the door, and then they figured out, well, how would this league even be structured? And fuck, how would we have teams from around the world be in a global league that also plays every week? How would that even work? And then even if we did that, though, how would we stop teams from just having a contenders team with all the really good... Right, we have to do that. And then what would we do to make teams be able to... Like, they can't get promoted, so what would other... every factor was figured out after the fact.
It's also very ridiculous that up until today, they still haven't made their rule book public.
Probably never will.
Yeah, probably never will.
They still supposedly haven't even paid the players from Contenders Season 1 yet. And that was like...
No, that was the
How
Overwatch
many of them will they
Cup,
actually pay? Because half of those teams were like...
It was the Overwatch World Cup, mate.
I think there was another one for Contenders too.
Could also be, but I know that the story was like the 2017 World Cup or 2016 World Cup hadn't been paid or whatever it was. 2017.
Yeah. It's like, this is Blizzard.
Will they ever see money? Probably not.
Right, do we have a volunteer to bounce?
I can drop out. I'm a little bit.
We're there. So we'll wait for him to join first.
Okay. I'm a little bit hungover anyway.
Already?
I'm going to the bathroom real quick.
Why not have some scotch, my man?
Well, there you go. Well, I do have some whiskey over in the kitchen, but
time for more booze.
Yeah, that's the cure. Just keep drinking.
Yeah. Much more booze.
But one other thing that has annoyed me about OWL though is like they announced the all-star teams like this past week, and it's really annoying to me because they haven't given any indication that they're going to do like a all owl team, like the equivalent of like the all NBA team.
Okay.
And the starters for the all-star team are basically just votes from fans. So like you get Guri being a fucking starter. Like she literally did not win a single game in Overwatch League, but she's, a starter for the all-star team. It just makes it a joke.
That also just shows you how, like, to be
That's
fair,
just like tokenism to me.
Yeah, I'll spin this into a positive for the Overwatch League. Unlike other leagues, that actually shows how engaged their fans are to a degree, because like you just know Shanghai Dragons, as outside of China, doesn't have many fans. So the fact that so many people,
Do they even
sadly
have
in this
fans
case,
in China is the question, because
sadly in this case, for
arbitral
political
authority.
reasons, yeah, unsurprisingly, people have voted that person in purely for some reasons that have nothing to do with how they play the game. But at least they have fans that care that much. I will say, though, you do notice in every game where you can have fans vote on something, they are almost unanimously wrong. Like, I'm not joking. This is how bad fans are in general. Wait there a sec. Do you have a topic, G-Man, coming in hot?
I do, actually. What do you think of all these League of Legends teams just deciding not to play their best players because of attitude reasons? Just stupid, isn't it?
That does feel like there's more to it, though. That's the part that's interesting. Because here's the thing. I actually understood if they were benching them because these players just can't play in the new meta and, they haven't adapted and there's problems. And who knows? Remember, in a world where you played all these support champions, maybe there is a player out there who is just a bench player but who actually is super sick on like Lulu or something and you want to play him. I could have respected that. The part I didn't get, though, is, the idea that it's because, it sounds as though these players had a bad attitude or some shit like that, or maybe in the chaos of having to change the meta, people are playing in that way. So I don't really know, because on the one hand, I actually think it's a good thing. Like,
yeah, but the thing is,
obviously you can never know what it means though by bad attitude.
Like, I love Jack, but he basically just said like by making this decision, they've literally said, fuck it, we'll lose. Like, and then Coma is just like, better bench Faker again, because that worked out so well last
Yeah, but
time.
that's the problem, is that you don't actually have any power in a game like League of Legends. Like,
that's true.
Like, this is not an exaggeration. If you have a superstar mid laner, he could just literally come in and say, by the way, fuck you and your wife, I'm playing the game now. Like, if you kick him out the game, you don't win the game. So the leverage is all on the player's side in that scenario. Now, it's not. You could obviously ruin his whole career. But the reason why it's unfair, and it will always be unfair, sadly, is most orgs are never going to out the fucked up shit that players do behind the scenes. That's why every fan loves players and hates orgs, because you almost never hear what these players do. Yet, every player who feels at all mistreated by their org, dude, they'll out it while they're still in the org, while they're still planning on playing for the org for 3 years. Like some of the things with like SK at the moment is beyond idiotic. Like, if I'm another org, I don't care if this SK team wins 10 majors in a row. If I was coming up to bid on their next contract in Counter-Strike, I wouldn't fucking do it. Look at the way they've treated their org now. They have been so rude and unprofessional. It's unbelievable. I don't care what was done to them. Like, that's like the Guardian defense of like, but they were being mean to me, therefore I can just not play the game. Like, no, well, sorry, mate, that doesn't follow on. So, unfortunately, I don't really know what recourse orgs have. And I agree with you, by the way. It doesn't make any sense to bench them and then lose the game. But the problem is, again, they're searching for a solution and they're looking at sports and going, right, well, if you bench someone, surely he has to come around and, come back. But does he, though? Because at the moment, you're in the like Dardoch Team Liquid situation where when you lose without him, when you then bring him back, even if you all say, now you've learned your lesson, in his mind, he's going to be going, no, of course I haven't. But you know what?
have to bring me back.
Killing it on that mid lane, aren't I, motherfucker? You are weak, Jack, physically and mentally.
Yeah.
The player is really that good. It's like, why would you bench him in the first place? Just let him play. I don't care if he's toxic or not.
Yeah.
Because I've heard so many stories behind the scenes of some of the things that players have done. Obviously, these aren't the current players we're talking about. But I'm on about like star players doing stuff like refusing to play a match, even one time intentionally trolling an LCS match. I've known players in Counter-Strike who've done stuff like literally told the team owner, like, not like we'll boycott, but like, you know, like if you don't let me leave this contract, I'm not going to properly play for you. You know, even if you make me play the game, I'll just play like shit. Now these are things which, if the org wanted to actually be devious, and people make out like orgs are all just mad scumbags, you can just publicize this and bury that fucking player tomorrow. But they don't, because generally the people who run orgs are older guys who know the way the world works, knows things will blow over. Also, just don't want to. Like, sadly, a lot of them actually are pretty reasonable people, as in, like, when they have players in their team, they do have sort of a vaguely familial relationship with them, and so they don't want to wreck that guy's whole career by just burying him with all the shit. That's why in the rare cases, like that one where Flipside came out and basically said in an interview, like, no, Simple was terrible, like, we're really glad he's gone. That's where you know some shit went really above and beyond the Call of Duty. Like, the stuff that must have been going on is, like, outrageous, and I can tell you in those scenarios, it usually is, like, the person's really abusive, so they kind of bring it on themselves. But no, sadly, players will always be the ones manipulating that side of the equation in a really dirty fashion, you know?
Yeah.
If players don't get what they want and are like really like against the org, I know people who make twitlongers about that and air every piece of dirty laundry that they have.
Yeah.
Sure.
That's
the problem is, like,
problem.
This is also where in the future having like proper general managers, which we don't have at all in esports right now. Basically, we just have a bunch of owners who are really sick of getting players. But if we had a real general manager where, cause his job is like chart the trajectory of where this team's going and what sort of pieces he wants, and, you know, he's added these 3 pieces, but this one's like uncertain, and he's going to add another one. If we had that, I think you would start to see some of this stuff get leaked, because it would now be used as leverage against those players and to get in the right sort of players. And so I have to say, personally, if I ever become a general manager, I will absolutely engage in that behavior. Like, that will be part of my toolkit. And if star players fuck with me, I will do what a certain team in CSGO did. I will reveal that they're asking for twice as much salary as the rest of their teammates. So if they want to play that game, they can do that. They can ask that demand, but I will now make it known publicly. But you'll never know it comes from me, because that's the way the journalism game works. You have the right person,
Just
you leak the source to. Exactly, it gets out there.
Give it to DK.
Did they have to change everyone though? Like, if he did that to just one, that the message would go through. No, it's like, okay, even Jensen got benched, so Sneaky's now, oh shit, I could be next. Or he just switched 3 players. That's a lot. Yeah.
Might be more going on than we get to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. But honestly,
who knows what kind of a shit show went down, you know?
But also, it's like the fact that not even you switched out Jensen and Sneaky for Golden Glue and Key.
Golden Glue.
Oh, something like, you must be really desperate. Let me really desperate, dude.
Let me remember one thing. Isn't Golden Glue the guy who went to like Korea like 5 times already or something like that?
Fucking Vault Boy who went to Korea, got Challenger,
boot camp for a month there.
Yep, and then came back and still sucked.
Still the same.
I don't understand why people are still like taking, like, you know what? Let's take another chance on Golden Glue. Let's take another chance on Keith.
Because unfortunately, there's a lot of owners in esports who like view the whole game through the lens of potential, and so if they think someone has like talent, and especially if they think they have talent and they think that they have a good attitude as well, those people will get infinite chances. Like, people will keep trying with those guys again and again and again and again. Whereas I personally generally only operate on what you can actually do. Like, I don't actually give a flying, especially because if you notice, it's not a very reliable trend to go off potential. Like, potential would have told you a year ago that people like Twists, Snafly, they should this year or next year be like the best player in the world. I mean, they're pretty far from that. I mean, even if Snafly was like the 5th best player in the world at one point in time, he was pretty far from number 1 at the same time.
Pretty goddamn good entry.
So potential's good, but they still have only locked some of that potential. And if they will never unlock it all, it then becomes, to me, it's a fun speculation, but it's not really interesting as analytical at basics. So sadly, most owners buy that shit that they tell. This is one area where owners aren't lying when they do the press release. You know, when they release a player from their team, or they have like a sub who you know is just never going to get to play, they'll always make it like, no, we believe in this player and he can develop a lot, and, you know, he was a very talented player. They believe that shit. Like, part of the problem as well, unfortunately, is they also do. This is why it's such a terrible spot for esports to be in, that the owner is also the general manager, but also signs the contracts with the players. Because why would you want that guy to have an emotional connection with the player? You want that guy to be business. This is why you want, like, the reason why general managers is a brilliant job in sports is because I get fired if this team doesn't do well enough in 5 years relative to where the expectation level is, regardless of how many players love me and how cool I seem as a I get fired. So as a result, it incentivizes me to sometimes be, like I've seen many times in traditional sports, like, let's say you're a good player on my team, but I can upgrade you and win the fucking Stanley Cup. Like, obviously, I'm going to do it instantly. Why would I? What am I waiting for? Doesn't matter that you're actually a good player, because I'm thinking of it just in terms of like trading. It's like being a fucking stock trader or something. I'm not going like, well, the people behind the stock are really cool though. So I think it's going to turn around, you know, like, I'm not going to sell now. No, you sell as soon as it starts going down. Like that's it. If your analytics tell you it's going to take a dive, you get the fuck out immediately. So yeah, unfortunately, I think that's a factor at play there. It's like basically politics.
So you have the best player in the world and the 5th best player. Hey, you want to trade him against the 2nd and 3rd best? If that works out better for me, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like you would instantly do it, obviously. In esports, you just want to win. Like, I know some people spin the narrative that they're a family business and that they want to continue like with their fans and all that shit. No, you just want to fucking win. If you don't want to win, get the fuck out the door.
Yeah, but that's what confuses me about Cloud9's move even more, because we saw that, you know, Jack was serious about winning with Overwatch League when he picked up the 2 Korean rosters. He was serious about winning when he, you know, opted to get Korean imports. And even on that Esports Salon episode, he's totally fine with importing Koreans if it means he'll win. So it makes this move even more confusing, because not only did you just like bring in worse players, but they're not winning. So what was the point?
And you should know from London Spitfire that bringing subs in doesn't really work that much for him.
Yeah, but the thing is, if I had to guess though, if there's real attitude problems, presumably it's with the coach, and the coach is the one position for whatever reason Jack is just unwilling to replace. So, I mean, you can keep spinning your wheels on that one for as long as you want. But
3 players, 1 coach. Guess who I would pick?
It's the best support in probably NA, or the best NA-born support. One of the top marksmen and a top 3 mid versus Reaper, who, despite all of his international success, has not actually done that much for you recently.
I think the support is just because of marksman synergy. I think that was their excuse.
I think that's more synergy.
I think it's more feasible that Sneaky is doing cosplays and so on. Jensen always was working hard, so that's to explain for me.
Jensen in EU or NA, always good.
Yeah.
Well, the reason the Jensen one's actually very surprising is because behind the scenes, Jensen is actually like quite close friends with Jack. So that also suggests to me that it's like coaching related, like some sort of fallout with the coach, or I didn't like the direction the team was going, or something along those lines. Because as a player, he's known to be someone who keeps his shape and keeps up to shape. And then in terms of ownership, relationship seems to be very good in that respect. So that one comes a bit out of left field. Not just the fact that you have to bench a good player, but the idea that like it's over some sort of attitude issue. Don't really understand that at all.
Yeah.
And again, in a meta where you can actually funnel gold to your carry, isn't Jensen like the one player you want in the West from the one still playing?
Yeah, but this is where it's not. Basically, the problem here is there's no solution.
Yeah.
So let's imagine, just for the sake of hypothetical, that Jensen was like classic simple 2 years ago, where he's actually being abusive to teammates. Like he's basically telling the coach, like, fuck you, I'm not going to do what you're going to tell me to do. He's just doing whatever he wants. And then his whole premise as to why he should be in the team is individually he's really good at the game.
Yeah.
Right? That's actually, if I had any real options, like let's say I actually, this is also, by the way, where maybe in the future LCS being franchise could help. Because actually, as you see in stuff like Overwatch League, where admittedly in Overwatch League, it's because at the moment, the basic salary everyone gets is so much higher than what people got pre-Overwatch, that someone really good will be a sub, at least for like a stage or two. Yeah. If you can really replace someone, first of all, you can now start to literally modify the behavior of the person who's misbehaving. Yeah. Secondly, you can also start to prepare for a world in which you're either not going to play him or you're going to move him. You can now start preparing for that without having to make the move already. So you actually have options and tools there. I don't know what tools you have right now in a game like League of Legends where your best player is the one misbehaving and he's just stuck in the team. So I don't really know what you do in that respect. So I think they're in a tough spot because I also don't agree. Like, if I ran a team, absolutely, I would not allow people to just like disrespect me. Like that would never
That's
happen.
kind of why I like the sister aspect of the LCK back in the day. It's like you could like just put your good player who's actually abusive into the other team.
Sure, that was another good angle you could go with. Yeah, you could bump the teams around because that's another factor. Is like, for the amount of criticism coaches get in League of Legends, CSGO, coaches are doing so fucking little. Like, I'm not saying because they're shit, they're not being given the agency to do anything. So when coaches get some of the abuse that they get, it's like, are you out your fucking mind? Like, if you think like Path from TSM's deciding all this shit, you're just literally blaming a guy where it's above his pay grade. He doesn't get to decide any of that shit. He's literally just an analyst who does a little bit of coaching with some of the players. That's about it.
Didn't he also even like say in an interview, I might be wrong about this one, that someone actually screwed up like a draft because he didn't even want to listen to him?
Stuff like that happens all the time, sadly. But again, think about it. Think about what you've done there. It is, so you have an official role called coach, and the one thing fans know a coach does is the draft. Brilliant. If I'm a player, what do you think I'm going to do all day long? Abuse my leverage in the draft because I can never be blamed for a shit draft. And even if I lose the game, I can always just say, well, you know,
the coach
draft wasn't good, was it? Maybe we shouldn't have picked that top lane champion. It's like, people never know I did it.
That's true.
This is why actually I hate the whole skew of like fans just take the players' side on everything, because players are literally the people who are all 19 years old with no responsibility, no experience working a job, running around deciding, right, well, because I'm skilled in one area of my job, I'm not going to accept any critical feedback in any other area. Like, the amount of abusive shit players do to their orgs is unbelievable. And half the time, the owner of the org has to be the one who compromises with the player to be like, right, how are we going to get this guy back on board? You know, I didn't like the way you did this, but okay, we'll give this part up here. And is this a decent agreement?
Yeah.
That is true.
So there's not really any way around that whole scenario.
No.
Yeah.
Especially because it's not it's a game where you even have transfer windows. So it's not like you can just go and sign half a new team and get a bunch of other players in.
Even though half of them like talk to each other beforehand, even though that is illegal, apparently.
See, the real sad thing, well, it's just illegal to get caught.
Yeah.
The real sad thing about Cloud9 is that, as he referenced, what I actually love about Jack is that he had that team in League of Legends where he stuck with the core for way too long.
Yeah.
But once that was broken up and provably wasn't the best, he did make all the baller moves to get the top talent in and to make all the upgrades he could. And likewise, Overwatch League, I think he actually, in terms of not knowing all the factors, he
made the right call.
Everyone.
He made the right call.
He wrecked everyone in the off season.
Yeah.
But the problem is, in CSGO, he has never applied that mentality. Because in CSGO, he still has the same problem as he had in the League of Legends one, where he's still too close to the core players. In fact, now even the core's changed and he just switched to the new core. And then also, he just hasn't made the big blockbuster moves from Europe because he tried once we get right, that's about it. Maybe he'll get MBK now. But I feel like years ago, he should have already been open to trying to make
international
really
team.
Good. Yeah, but the downside is, unfortunately, for CSGO, the game's capped out to where there's no point if you're a really good European, go to America. Like, the downside on your life is just too much. So unfortunately, we're never going to have proper LCS crossover like that.
Yeah.
Right, what's another topic?
Oh, I've got one. If no one else.
Any here watch Quake? The new Quake champions?
I don't think anyone does.
No.
Right, what are you thinking about?
Who, me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other one bringing it up.
I was like thinking if like anyone like familiar with Quake. Currently, the game's in a fairly good state. Actually, it's like the developers listen to the pros.
What did they change?
The movement. They changed the health and armor. They changed the speed and the movements of champions.
What's the basic gist of what they did? Like they just buffed and nerfed stuff.
Yeah, and then like they went to a lot of Bonjwas, like Cooler, Rafa, The Hang, Cypher.
Okay.
They went to all the good players and they asked them like, if you could change one thing, what would it be that you would change?
Okay.
And they changed a whole bunch of stuff because of them, and now the game's in a fairly good state. But like, they also gave 2 weeks free access for like
Yes, I saw
try
that.
it
It was like
out.
free for a couple of weeks to play,
Yeah.
right?
And they have a tournament circuit, but it's only 6 big ones for a whole year. Now,
Sure.
that is kind of sad because in the early days, Quake was the big game, and a lot of people, the game has unique mechanics, like you never will find a game currently that is a 1v1 duelist game. It's very unique in the sense that people who came after like the years of 2004, let's say, will never actually have experienced compared
The big
to like
problem I had, so let me ask
Counter-Strike.
this then. When you watch a Quake duel now,
Yeah.
the instant thing that turned me off the game is a mixture of having ults, which meant that now you're not playing a duel anymore. You have to draw certain ults out of people, like the fucking invisibility one. Obviously, if the person has the invisibility, they can always get away when they have 2 health if you haven't drawn out. So first of all, that messed up like the duel dynamic. And then secondly, probably the biggest killer of the game for me was I tried watching a whole bunch of games. And the first few I watched, I thought, right, this must just be these players. These players are like playing way too defensive. I assume this is just like these guys have got a defensive style. And at the first few tournaments I watched, every game was like this. Like every game, because of the scoring format and how OP certain heroes were, it's like people... Whereas in a normal Quake game, you take the engagement because actually sometimes you can even die and know, right, he's going to be on 10 health even if he survives. So I'll kill him off the spawn or something like that, or I'm just an aggressive player. It's like everyone knew because of the scoring format, like I shouldn't really take any engagement unless it's like semi-favorable for me. And so you just got a people constantly going close to each other, shooting each other and then backing off, going close to each other, almost getting into a fight and then backing off again. And it's like, then you add in the ults, which half of them are used to fucking escape anyway.
Yeah.
Just meant that like, it was basically people not fighting Quake battles, which is the whole point of Quake 1v1,
It's true.
Does that still exist? Is that a problem?
That is a problem to a certain extent. Yeah. That is true.
Because that was the main killer for me. Because to me, the problem there is you
People
already
have started
didn't get...
to figure out how to use the ults like aggressively as well.
Okay.
So that is a good thing. But yeah, a lot of people still use it defensively.
But this
Take
was the
quad
big problem.
protection. Like that is a problem, yes.
Is like, if you do that, first of all, you already didn't get all the casual fans. Like that ship sailed.
Yeah,
Like, you just
that
didn't
ship
manage to.
sailed.
And so unfortunately, if you kill the core of Quake, you're also not going to get the hardcore fans. So I even feel like a lot of Quake fans aren't all in on Quake Champions as well.
That is true. A lot of hardcore fan base, like say, I prefer Quake Live still over this one. And it is a reason that like they don't like the ultimate like abilities of champions. That is true.
The sad thing is, this is where if Quake Live could have lasted a bit longer, I feel like we could have saved it. Because if Quake Live could have lasted, say, 10 years, in 10 years, I personally might be at the level. A couple of other people might be at the level. And there might be enough plebs at the level where we could actually have ourselves funded a circuit and had like a pretty sick circuit. Because the upside is, cause Quake's a 1v1 game, we only really need like the 10 best players in the world to play full time, and then other people to kind of pick their spots. Like, if you're Swedish and you're like the 15th best player, you just go, right, well, I'm going to put in some heavy time when there's like a DreamHack summer, but otherwise, I'll chill out and I won't be going to every tournament. You just basically need like Kula, Rafa, the really good players to be the ones playing full time, and then you just need to have roughly enough tournaments to support them. Like, I think roughly, I would say like 6 isn't bad if you spread it out over the year, because it gives them time to go away and have a life and then come back.
Sadly,
and,
like
get
all
back
of
in
them
shape.
are like near the summer. That's kind of
Yeah, I mean, that's just unfortunately the factor of having tournaments organized. But I'm saying more if like the fans could crowdfund it,
that would
because,
be a cool idea.
Because I'd pay for like a tournament. The problem is, like, I wouldn't do it if it's a one-off. It has to be like a real circuit where you're getting something out of the players. Because, like, to support those players, again, we're talking about 10 people.
Yeah.
Like, you're not talking, it wouldn't be millions, if you could just put in like 50k. Like, if I could put in 50k of my own, like, that already would be very healthy.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, unfortunately, the scene's not really at where it needs to be right now.
No.
So basically, it could just exist off patronage, but sadly, esports has ignored that aspect. Like, I think that is the way they always should have run it. Like, it should have been a side game at a lot of these big tournaments, and they should have found a way to monetize it. And I would even have sold it on the angle of like, this is like connecting back to the history of esports or some bullshit like that, but
Would have been a
whatever
selling
reason-
point, yeah.
for whatever reason, they've decided to just go the other way. Sadly, it's because everyone in esports is feeling the squeeze right now, and no one really makes insane money. So as a result, you've got to kind of crush all the margins you can. So I don't blame them entirely. Right, what about another non-Quake related topic?
Oh, I was gonna say what's the next for FaZe's 5th? Should they keep Crummin? Should they try and fight someone else? Or
I think as long as he works out for him, why not stick with him? He's not bad. Yeah. Like, he is a talent.
He did perform really well, but the question is, like, should they just stick with Crummin going forward, or should they bring back Olaf?
I feel like the way he performs, it's because he has no pressure. Like, if he was like their main 5th, I think he would feel the pressure after a while, and he would, like, his performance would drop off. That's just my idea.
Also, I don't know if with Chroman they can reliably be first, and I think that will always be their goal. So even if they're good, they might still change him out for some other good player because they want to be number 1. And maybe with him they can't.
Yeah, the difference is, unlike most other teams, this is actually one thing, and it's another reason why it's hilarious that FaZe doesn't have more fans. I know they do because they have this very weird, like, crossover fan base where they do actually have FaZe fans from the other games, which I never thought would happen, but fair play to those COD guys. They did bring over some of their fan bases. But what's weird is, as an actual team in Counter-Strike, I don't feel like FaZe is that popular for a team that's won that often and has that many fucking superstar names on that we all like, you know, they're like the household names. You'd think they'd be the number 1 most popular team among all fans, because think about them as a squad. First of all, they're made up of everyone's like dream players. Then they are even openly committed to buying the best players to remain number 1. Like every other team is lying to you. Astralis was completely happy playing 2018 with Kirby in the old lineup. They would have had the old lineup and come 4th at about 10 tournaments. They were happy doing that. Now, they would have believed in their mind that they were going to change and they were going to improve in tactics. So you know what? They might have. Maybe they would have improved. Maybe they would have been good still. But they were not willing to make a killer move and go and pay any amount of money to get config or do some like outrageous move where you get a non-Danish. But they wouldn't do that. That is, they were only willing to win on their terms. Likewise, all these other squads, Na'Vi, you go down the list, pretty much every other team has their own limiting factors. FaZe is the only team I'm aware of that has the money and the actual like stated goal of be number 1 at all times. So it's a pretty admirable goal, you know. Now you can definitely argue whether buying the best players is the best approach. Absolutely, there's a lot more to it than that. But I at least appreciate the goal, at least the fact that you're shooting for the top spot.
If you have money to burn, like, buying the best players might actually work out.
It's at least worth giving a shot. Like, if you're the person who's just the guy with the money, that's objectively the best move you can typically make, because normally you're going to need some godlike coach or player to scout a player if you're not going to get the best player, because why else would you pick someone who's inferior? So, and then you also look at the team they have. Players like Carrigan, Guardian are only in this team if it can be number 1. They're not in this team to come 6th and not win any more majors. Like, they're in this team to try and complete like their trophy cabinet before they exit the game, however gracefully, to whatever their next phase of their life is. Like, might be as a coach, might be just quit the game entirely and go off to real life. So again, it's the right team for them in that particular respect, you know. Like, the saddest thing in professional sports is when some player who's like still roughly great enough joins some franchise where it's like you can tell they're not going to actually put like the talent around them to win, and it's like you're just going to end your career like this, mate. Like, you're going to be okay as a team, but you're not going to have a chance to win. So
kind of hate that when that happens. It's like you could have like at least trained rookies to get better. Like, you could have given like the second best team in your region a chance to like learn from you, give your experience past, like work your way back up maybe with them, even maybe like that would be better than like a good player.
Well, here's an opinion you never hear. That is why Virtus.pro are also fucking morons, because this is a team that had unlimited resources, right? So forget money, we've got that all taken care of. So that's not even a concern now. But we all know there is no 5-man lineup is going to play 10 years of Counter-Strike. So we know eventually we're going to have to make roster moves. Oh, what's that? We have an all-Polish team and no other org in the world actually cares about Polish players. Look at all the other orgs. Like, Kingwin and AGO are not big orgs. Anyone who's under the imagination that, like, for example, people at the moment, I remember after this Star Series were like, haha, wow, now the AGO players shouldn't join Virtus.pro. Like, if you know anything about the game aside from just the in-game server stuff, every player would leave that team. They could literally do the Joker move out of Batman, The Dark Knight Returns, and just say, right, you have to murder each other, and whoever's left gets to join, and they'd do it instantly.
We have tryouts.
So sadly, that's not the case. But this is why Virtus Pro is so stupid. Because what I would have been doing for the last few years is playing constantly with all those other Polish players and figuring out who's going to join the team and who I would want to join the team and who I should be considering and gauging where they're at and figuring out. I'd even use that as a method to keep the other players in line. Like if I was the in-game leader and this player's not playing well, I'd say, listen, we play with this other guy sometimes. Look, he's getting pretty good. We'll have to make the change eventually if you don't turn it around. And, as I say, they had a lockdown on the Polish scene. The talent's only going to go to them. There's no face this is the reason why it's hard to 100% blame teams from other regions. So, for example, when Fnatic overtook NIP, right, the actual timing on when they took it, there was a window in which NIP could have, like preempted problems and cut players and got them. But at the same time...
Didn't they even want to get JW at that window in time?
No, this is before then. But the problem is... At the time that the NIP could have done that, there was enough extenuating circumstances you could have just said, like, okay, maybe not. But the difference is there was a rival team that could take those players and did and superseded them. Who is there who's going to take any of these Polish players? No one. Not least because the Polish players themselves have done a terrible job. Like, if I was people coming up 2 years ago... Sadly, I know most of them just banked on the idea we might get an Virtus Pro, or were just deluded enough to think their team was good enough. I would have been learning English. I would have, from basically 2015, middle of 2015 on, I would have been having English lessons. I'd have been paying for that. And then at this point in time, there's 3 or 4 players from that region could absolutely be in a better team that's from another region. Some of them could probably even be on fucking mouse spots if they'd actually put in the effort, but they didn't. So,
didn't they try Innocent, or was that Penta?
He played for Penta, yeah.
Yeah.
But the problem is, he's just not that good a player, is he? So he's kind of wasted his potential there. He had a chance a couple of years ago to be pretty good, but it's too late now. The Penta team was never sadly going to go anywhere because they had no finances. That's why I knew from day one that Sonny guy was going to leave that team and go to a better squad because they can't afford to pay you to be a top player, So sadly, there's a lot of squads like that. That's why I never understood that whole thing. Haha, Mouse Spots is stealing Penta's players, mate. If Mouse Spots is stealing your players, you're
broke.
Your team is fucking poverty. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
What are you talking about? Mouse Spots is getting mad underpaid. If they're stealing your players, maybe you should come up with some shekels.
For real.
That is true. But they could have gone the route of academy team. They could have established an academy team to practice every single time.
Every single big org should have had an academy team, basically. Sadly, it was inevitable, unfortunately, because of the fact we have an open system that they would get killed like this.
Yeah.
I'm glad it happened. It should happen.
Thank God, because LC abuse would be insane.
Probably. But sadly, it would have improved matters. It would have given you a chance to develop talent. It would have given you a chance to test someone in your line. It would have given you a chance to take a sub who at least players in your org and your coaches worked with. It would have all these upsides to it. Sadly, though, the level of abuse that is possible isn't even worth thinking about. The one game that we actually, seemingly for the longest time, had avoided it was League of Legends. And League of Legends, I'll say allegedly, but I secretly mean provably, had a case of mad match fixing that happened, which just ruined the whole concept that you could have teams that are sister teams. So a second I saw that happen, I was on board with kill all the sister teams, get rid of them all, because we can't allow rank abuse like this to get people in a favourable position. So nothing you can really do with that one.
It's you have to win this series against your sister team to advance. Let's see. This might be, how do you call that one?
Funny thing is, Koreans themselves already were primed to abuse all sorts of corruption anyway, because they have openly said in the past of esports, yes, we have thrown games against each other. I can't believe people don't care about it, because nowadays it's the biggest topic ever.
It is true.
Korean StarCraft players have openly admitted, I'm just going to lose this game against this guy because I'm already through and he's Korean. This is not hidden. They have publicly said it in interviews. But everyone let them skate because they were like, oh, okay. Now, here's the problem. You should let them skate. If you have a system that allows people to throw games like that, in that scenario where the guy isn't incentivized, you actually can't enforce him to play his best. Like, that's not even unfair. The problem is, in some other scenarios, yeah, it shouldn't be happening, where sometimes it was like explicitly done. Right, go. Okay, let's get another topic.
Still on CS, what do you think is going to happen to Happy now that he's out in the wild?
Happy will change his name to Depression and quit the game.
But I actually really liked this post. Maybe it was all bullshit, but I really liked this tweet longer.
What did you like about it?
Basically, he wasn't putting blame on anyone, and he was saying, I'm open to all offers. I'm ready to work hard and do whatever.
Here's the question.
Let's have a look at the
Would you still work with a person who still has the same style as in 2014, still plays that exact same style, which is very easy to figure out, by the way?
Yeah,
would you still play with that guy? No, I wouldn't.
Well, not if I'm, G2, but if I wouldn't still do it if I was envious. I wouldn't do it if I was LDLC. I wouldn't do it if I was anybody in the world who would want to contend for a fucking title. I think LDLC should, depend on salary and stuff. I think
I'm actually amazed that you think this tweet long is good. I'm looking at it again now. First of all, it's incredibly short. Like, there's barely anything in here. All he basically does is say, oh, well, I hope things would go well, and then it didn't go well, and then I tried something else. I was really hoping, no, not again, and then, maybe, but nah, in the end, not. And then just like, thanks, everyone. Thanks, love all, y'all. Now, here's the mad thing. Is the only time he actually takes responsibility himself is he says that it's the in-game leader's responsibility to come up with a system, blah, blah. But that's about it. He's not really that harsh on himself.
Yeah.
He doesn't provide any transparency for what happened in the team. I mean, here's the thing, right? This is where we will see things very differently. So you see this and you go, right, that seems very reasonable. No, this is the person who explicitly fucked everything up for 2 straight years, scared all talent away from his team, to the extent that at the end, they even had a mutiny and kicked him out of his own team. And at the end of it all, after he's fucked everything up, goes, well, you know what? I'm not going to blame anyone else. And you're like, fuck, you're so magnanimous, mate. It's like, what? I think we see this tweet longer differently, mate. Like,
he even scared off the guy who prepared everything for him in like every online season that they could.
Okay, maybe I oversold it, but I still think it's not going to be tomorrow. But I still think he can come back. Where it's not like Link's tiny violin, where it's.
But who would want him though?
Yeah,
there's not really a team for him.
Tier 2, 3 teams. There's no very good French teams now, so.
Thanks to him.
Yeah.
Thanks to this cocksucker.
Maybe people would take him back as a player, but he would have absolutely.
He's already set a precedent for that, though, mate. He's ruined that chance for himself entirely. I can tell you already that people absolutely would have played with this guy as a player in all the best French teams till today, but he fucked it up for himself in 2016 when he let NBK be the in-game leader, and then basically a mixture of like sulking and actively sabotaging the team so that he could become the in-game leader again meant that they let him be the in-game leader, and then all basically sort of privately went, fuck this guy. The second we get a chance to get out of this team, we're leaving this team. And that is why all top talent has abandoned him. Now, funnily enough, the irony of this, the ultimate irony of it all, is that this is someone who himself told me to my face that a good reason that you can say Existence is not a good in-game leader is that top talent chose not to play with him. That is what he gave as a key reason as to why Existence cannot be a good in-game leader. Now, all I'm going to do is do this, just hold up a mirror and just go, see that reflection? That's you. That's you, that is. So,
I'm just going to say this. They came back to Existence 2 years later asking him if he would come back for them.
People don't realize, like, the reason to leave Existence is a very good one. I was on board with it. This is where people actually completely ignore my actual opinions, which is that if you have bombed a million majors, if I'm the best player in the world, like if I'm Kenny S or something, I'd probably say, you know what, I'll let someone else figure that shit out with you. If you figure it out, come back in 2 years and then maybe we can try playing together then. But if this guy Happy's winning and his style's super loose, and you know what, your style was already like really strict tactics, and that is the least fun style to play if you're not winning. There's all the reasons in the world to leave. I totally get why they left. The problem they had was you didn't really have good options in exchange for it. You had HawpT for a time, and that actually, you'll notice that very quickly ran out. It was only, in fact, around the time Existence was kicked from G2 was when HawpT was already hitting his problems. You couldn't find anyone else in the French scene to be an in-game leader. You don't want to do international squads. So actually, I mean, I kind of knew it already, but to me, it was never a case of if Existence will ever have a good team again. It was just when. It'll be which set of good players decides to give him a shot. Because you have to. I mean, by the way, this already happened. Like, I don't know why people are surprised by this. Has no one heard of Glaive? Where the fuck was that guy for 2 years? He was completely banished from the scene. None of the top players wanted to play with him. He had to use all the tier 2 and tier 3 Danish talent. Then he basically was gone completely. Came back in a team where he wasn't the in-game leader. And out of nowhere, got a custom-made shot at a potential best team in the world. Like, to a degree which is way more egregious than what Existence has gotten now. And people weren't mad with that because at the time there were no options left. No one wanted to have MSL be the Astralis in-game leader. Carrigan was having his issues with the team. You look elsewhere, there wasn't really anyone else. Snappy himself had just come up. Glaive at least was someone where people knew. Same story with Existence. People knew he was a tactical in-game leader. People knew he likes to run a certain system, that he was a smart player. He seemingly had paid his dues and showed that, like, you know, he'd gotten over his problems as a person. Now, in the Existence example, it's more just that. I actually think the biggest factor that pushed him to Existence isn't even just HawpT and the failure of the team. It's the fact that their entire style failed. That, like, ridiculous force buyer style, they ran it into the ground. Still works for other teams. Don't worry about that. They can't run it for they can't buy a kill when they do that. So that they have to change something up drastically, which is why the Existence move ultimately makes most sense of all. Because why not go back to playing a tactical style?
Yeah.
It's even pretty good right now in the world of Counter-Strike if you look at all the top teams. It's also pretty good counter to the other top teams. That's the part people aren't stopping and thinking about, is if G2 becomes really good tactically, I could see them doing fantastically against the A-tier squads of the Fanatics, the FaZe Clan, NIP. Well, NIP's maybe a bit of a stretch. Like, those sorts of teams, I think they'd be primed to do very well against those squads.
I mean, if they could replicate, like, half of the team synergy that Astralis has, hell, I'd give him a shot at top 5 right now.
Yeah. The only thing that makes
personally, I like the HawpT one. If we keep it on that,
okay. So
I don't think he's going anywhere personally. Like I would assume he's going to play for someone, but I don't know any single team in the world who wants him.
Somewhere.
Could be the case.
Eventually.
Okay, so moving on to maybe more optimistic player. What about Golden? What do you think is next for him?
I actually think it's sad that, like, they benched him for Draken, but because he did bring a style, he did bring a system. It's like,
who is the leader of the Red Reserve team, the former Godsent squad? Who's the in-game leader of that team?
I have no fucking clue. Let me check.
Let's look this up. I would assume Freddie B, because I think he was the in-game leader. Yes. Oh no, apparently, according to Wikipedia, it's Hampus. No, he's still on team apparently. It's Hampus, apparently, who I don't really know because he's in the old Red Reserve squad.
Who's in there right now?
If I was their squad, I'd consider picking up Golden. Like, you've got a mixture of talent there. Actually, if you look at how they've played at recent tournaments, like at Star Series, they were a half-decent team. They have decent coaching as far as I know. They also have potential because, like, you have to realize, since Brolin is 15 years old, let me have a look, is he still 15?
16.
Right, he's 16 now because it was like last week or something. That is a player where you can keep the same lineup and he could just get like twice as good in the next 6 months for all you know. So this is not a bad team, actually. This is some quality players. So maybe you add Golden there. That might take them to the next level. I would give it a go.
Yeah, that would actually be a good one.
But do you think there's a good reason for him to having been benched or kicked? Or you think it was just the players wanted to play with?
Good reasons they don't want to play with him, yeah.
Apparently, HawpT will play with Pollux, Sixer, Lambert, and Mistu in Boys in Blue.
I mean, that sounds appalling, but okay.
It's a start.
I feel bad for these guys.
I mean, some of those are like just the Envious Academy members, basically. And then Mistu is like, you might remember he used to play in the LDLC squad when Existence first joined, but he got booted. He wasn't a very good player, to be honest. Let me think. No, because unfortunately, like, this is actually where, if I'm an in-game leader, and I'm in any way a tactical in-game leader, I would never in my entire career agree to play with JW Flusher. Because JW and Flusher, literally, I'm not exaggerating here, and listen, they might get mad at this, I don't care, but they are those people who, because they do a lot of their own plays on their own instinct, I think they genuinely believe that like their playmaking is what makes these teams. And so even though to the outside world, Golden definitely brought something to that squad and revitalized them and made them a better team than they were when they actually had better players before. Yeah. They are not good people who believe that that's the case. Like they think that like it's overrated what he did to the team, and like, you know, we can actually, he only brought a little bit, and you know, he wasn't that good a player, and so if we add exists, we can fix it all. So it's a classic example of where this is why a lot of really good in-game leaders take on like that general mentality of like, I'm the commander here, you will follow all my commands, because otherwise people just don't give you any credit. These motherfuckers actually think them shooting the guy in the head is what won the round at the end. Like one of the mad things about Counter-Strike is it is literally inconceivably consistent as a game tactically. It shouldn't be. When you run into the Mirage A bomb site as a terrorist, you can get shot from 10 different angles before you have a chance to shoot.
You shouldn't be able to kill 3 people.
So why are you able to execute tactics where you consistently get on the site, get the bomb planted, get post planted? Because somehow really good in-game leaders know the numbers and they know the angles and they know how to set up an overall strategy and what the counter to what the other guy is doing. And as a result, yes, there'll still be some variance in who kills who when you're in a straight up aim duel, but you get an amazing amount of consistency in terms of how often you can run a strat and you can run a style and you can do the same things over and over again. And so that's the reason why there will always be value in having a tactical style. But unfortunately, there's like a key principle I have in esports, which is as soon as someone like a coach or an in-game leader teaches a player a principle, because teaching people is sort of helping them learn for themselves. That's the most effective teaching, is you sort of say, right, I'll keep explaining something and you tell me when you understand it, okay? But I'm not really making you understand it. Like if you're an idiot, you'll never understand it. And if you just think very differently, you might never understand it. But if I lay it out, what I'm kind of doing is I'm saying, right, here are the pieces. Here's how I think they fit together. Can you see that? And if you see it, it'll instantly become clear to you, but it'll now seem obvious. And you'll go, wait, you didn't really teach me anything. I could have figured that out myself, you know? And so you wouldn't believe how ungrateful star players are in every esports game I've been in. Like that, the best example of this ever was in the infamous Lynx, like Donzo Manifesto, where he said that line, which is probably one of the stupidest lines of all time, which was that he thought Monte Cristo didn't bring anything to their team. He just told them to play Siva, and that they won the game because they pressed R. Now, I can tell you, I sat and listened to some of these coaching sessions. Some of these guys were fucking clueless about the meta of League of Legends at the time, as in how a team should play. They still tried to play individually. And then also their comms were dog shit when he joined that team. And then thirdly, some of them were way behind the competitive meta, because if you remember at the time, they had Chowster and they had Big Fat Gigi, and they had these players that were from the old school where they used to just make shit up as they went along and do whatever they thought was best, even if the meta went against it. So they had to be taught to play the new meta. Now, it's true, players like Link were so smart, they could pick it all, and Afromu could pick it all up, they could apply it all, they could integrate it into their game. And so then they decided, I mean, I consider it quite ungrateful, to just like BM someone and be like, did you really teach me anything? I probably would have figured it out myself. It's like, did you though, motherfucker? So, you know.
All I'm going to say is this. Before you met Monty, after you met Monty.
Sadly, that was like a very ungrateful team in that respect. So, oh well.
Yeah.
Right, let's do one more topic then. Let's pick one more.
I have a small one related to this, which is about in Counter-Strike when the teams don't get the good guns to the best players. Is this because...
That just pissed me off.
But is it because it's not part of the comms to do it, or just random, or...
Some people are just ignorant that they should give the weapon to their best player and give themselves more chances to win. But you know what?
Sadly, if you notice in almost every single team game, there is a massive emphasis put on conveying to the star player at every possible turn that even though you are the star player, you're not bigger than the team, you're not more important than anyone else, because he obviously is. That is objectively true to everyone. But if he acts as if he is, It's going to ruin all the morale of his teammates. They're not going to feel valued. They're not going to play for him. He's not going to be able to get them to play for him. There's going to be all these factors that mean generally, because the one thing you can usually assume quite safely is that the superstar, mega talented guy is going to be quite arrogant anyway, is if we all just start from day one taking the like approach of tempering that, we'll trust that force will continue to exert outwards. We'll push him back in a bit, and that's how we'll create a good team atmosphere. But the problem is, a lot of players who are then the scrub players believe that at face value. And you get people like Taco and SK believing that they are equally as important as coldzera, and that them playing their role is as irreplaceable as coldzera playing his role, and they go way too far the other way. And so sadly, this manifests in Counter-Strike teams as the star player doesn't say to the ship player, give me that gun, because that would be considered being a bad teammate. The in-game leader doesn't say to that player, give him your gun, because that would imply to the player, you're not as important and you're not going to be the player who gets the kills. And so because so many players are young and they believe confidence is actually magic, I mean, it is. It's a psychological trick to make yourself believe you're better. Because they believe it's magic, they think that, like, well, if I was really confident, then I would get a kill with this gun. And the coach is like, well, don't tell him not to get the gun because then he won't be confident. So they do this mad sort of like, they try to create the circumstances that would follow confidence without it being a real thing. And so they also consider it just being a bad teammate to demand the gun. Even though objectively, you should always give your best player the best gun in that scenario. And especially, actually, Na'Vi is the most egregious, because I don't know if you saw this stat, that Simple only gets it 28% of the time, which is still a lot, by the way. That's for most teams, that would be very high. But the difference is, it should obviously be like 80%.
Yeah.
You know, it should be almost every time. And then the other aspect, unfortunately, is sometimes star players like Simple and Nico spin it themselves where they say, right, but I'm actually better with a deagle than that guy is, so I could probably still get a kill with a deagle, and he has an AK, so he has a chance, which isn't entirely wrong. There's a logic to that. It's just that I don't know a single player in the world except maybe Lecro who's better with a deagle than an AK. Like, I'm not aware of that player. And in the case of Simple, he is many times better with an AK than a deagle. So you would absolutely win a lot more rounds giving him the AK. And in fact, you would even get more guns that the guy with the deagle can now pick up. So those are the areas I don't think it makes sense. I will say there are certain circumstances where people misapply that principle, though. Like, for example, if you have a dedicated entry fragger, sometimes it might make more sense for him to have an AK over like some superstar player who's going to be like coldzera probably shouldn't have the AK every time, because the difference is he could pick up the same AK. Like, he could use the old Russians in World War II strat for getting weapons when you don't have enough. So that would actually work for him. You know, there's a logic to that.
Yeah, there's logic.
The problem is it doesn't make as much sense for the Simple example because the guy entries as well. So if anything, that's the reason I'd give him the AK. I'd have him entry, and if you want, just have the other guy right behind him to pick it up if he dies. He doesn't even have to get the kill necessarily.
A good one would be Freakazoid when he was on C9 or Apex on G2.
Yeah, but you never give the op to Zeus. Like, that's just, there's no excuse, right? When Simple is with an SMG or just a pistol.
The problem is,
Like,
people never bring this up, but Zeus is easily one of the most mysterious people in the entire Counter-Strike scene. I don't know anyone who's won as much and has had that much like exposure on his name and his teams who so little is known about in the West, because he doesn't speak English, he doesn't engage with the West. So I remember all the memes were just a different person on his fucking Twitter account posting stupid jokes that Zeus would never make. Like, I don't know why people really bought into that. I won't name who, but there was actually a tournament organizer who in CS told me like, oh, it's going to be fantastic. We've got Na'Vi coming and Zeus. And I was like, yeah, what's fantastic about that? And he goes, oh, we're going to do so much content with them. And I go, he doesn't speak English and he doesn't do any of those jokes. That's like a different guy on his Twitter. And he goes, what?
Oh my God.
Go,
really?
See, mate.
That can't
So that actually happened. But anyway, the point I'm getting to is nobody actually knows what Zeus thinks about his career. We don't know if he thinks that the style he was playing last year, at the end of last year, was good. We don't know if he thinks that Simple shouldn't have the gun all the time. We don't know if he thinks he is a good player. No one knows what this guy thinks, unfortunately. So sadly, we don't really have any insight into him there, because I have to say,
he can't think like Doja, can he?
I think he does to a degree. Like, I actually think Zeus thinks he's way better than everyone else does. And I also think he, sadly at the moment, I can't say too much about this, but I also do think he's a bit entitled at the moment. Like, I think the fact that he's won a major and he had to be asked to come back, I think makes him not actually do 100% of what he could do as an in-game leader. So It's not the end of the world, but it's definitely not what you'd want when you got the best player, because you're not going to really make the best use of him. But
even at that major, I wouldn't credit them too much. I feel he did a decent amount more that major than most people do.
Sure, but we can never really know, unfortunately. You know, we can never really break down the entirely, because to be fair, without him, they're not really that good. So it goes both ways on that one, definitely. No, here's the problem. All of his accomplishments are deserved. It's just the problem is,
how much percentage did he take credit for?
I just don't know what he feels like he is demanded of him right now. Like, you have to remember, he's the guy where for his career, he was idling his career at the end of Na'Vi before. So
yeah,
a lot of people like that. In fact, I even thought this would happen. I don't know if I ever said it on a podcast. It might have been one of those ones that's just lost to history now. But when he left Na'Vi, because of the way he was cut, he was a completely useless player. He wasn't the in-game leader, so there was no benefit to having him in Na'Vi. So when they cut him, and then all of a sudden he became a player that was necessary for Gambit, and they got better players in Gambit, I knew exactly this storyline would play out, which is, wow, I'm motivated now because I want to get revenge. Oh, this is really driving me. Oh, I've won a major and no longer need revenge. Now my motivation has fallen away. It's just human psychology. So sadly, it's not really that crazy if you think about it. There's not many people in the world. There's not many people in the world that are like super driven. That's why when Lurpus says, like, you notice a lot of his analysis of the industry will be stuff like, oh, this player gets paid a lot, so, you know, maybe they're not motivated. He's right. That is actually a pragmatic way to look at the esports industry. There are a lot of stupid players who think, I'm making a lot of money, so why would I put in more effort? The actual players who are super driven are so rare, and to be fair, they will literally play the same way for $1,000 as they will for 20k, because it's not connected to money. I don't know a single player in Counter-Strike who's putting in more hours because he gets paid more. That was always the number one excuse, was like, we don't get the full salary as you, so we're not putting as bullshit. Like I've already said about the mouse sports team on this podcast, one of the best teams in the world. They're not getting vaguely what the other top teams are. This video was kindly supported by Dean Tanglis, Gardner Wilson, Andreas Snazore Westerlund, Alex Adams, Daniel Yordanov, TTMXMP, VeXii, HawpT, Robert Baxter, and Travis Greb, with a special thanks going out to Jerky's Minion. Want teasers for my upcoming content? To ask a question for my monthly AMA? How about taking part in a discussion with me about esports? Or perhaps you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? Become a part of the Scrilluminati today at the Patreon link in the description box below.